Chapter 472. Just as Su Qing had said, he didn't want to see Dayo sink into the quagmire of Tianjing Basin. Under the pincer attack from all sides, Dayo was likely to collapse. It would only benefit him if Great Xia suffered another crushing defeat. Therefore, after everyone left the city, he found an opportunity to see Rinpochen. Rinpochen gave him a thumbs up after hearing this. Even though he, the spy, had left, there was still a snitch. These people from Tianjing Basin didn't die unjustly. Su Qing smiled modestly at Rinpochen's gesture of praise. I definitely won't forget about our agreement. Rinpochen cupped his hands and hurriedly went to look for the Empress. In just a few moments, the soldiers of the Protectorate of the South were ready to set off. Rinpochen muttered to himself for a while and said, "If you can capture them alive, bring them back alive. Of course, your own safety is the most important." Shi Huanya looked at the Empress, who nodded and said, "Do as he says." Understood. Shi Huanya cupped his fists at the Empress, led everyone on their mounts, and set off under the cover of night. The thunderous hoofbeats alarmed the birds and beasts in the distance, and for a moment, the roars of the beasts lingered in the air. There were winged cavalry warriors rushing over from the north of Wu City, and Mount Wu was in the west. Most people dispersed towards the south and east before returning to their sects via other routes. Shi Huanya's 1,000 cavalrymen headed straight for the south. As for how many people he could catch, that would depend on his luck. After all, those earthwheel experts weren't weaklings. They could hear the hoofbeats of the cavalry from afar and find a place to hide. Therefore, Shi Huanya and his group headed straight to the south this time. When the sky started to brighten, they began to cast their nets to search for fish. After they left, the Empress asked Rinpochen, "Previously, you said that you had an agreement with him. What was it?" Rinpochen told him about the agreement he had with Su Qing. This was to ensure that the rebellion in the south had not been pacified and that it was dragged into a quagmire. Unless absolutely necessary, the armies of the Protectorate of the South could not be mobilized, and new armies would have to be mobilized to the south. After all, this wasn't a small matter. This method would cause Great Xia to become restless again. At that time, Dayo would really have to face a pincer attack from 3 nations. Therefore, he wasn't confident that the Empress would agree. However, under the circumstances at that time, he couldn't care about anything else. Therefore, after he finished speaking, he began to think about how the Empress would view this matter. If Great Xia, the Yun nation, and the Qin nation attack together, do you think Dayo can win? The Empress asked. Would Her Majesty lose? Rinpochen asked. The Empress's cold eyes lit up and a smile appeared on her face. Of course I won't lose. Then he said, but these are 2 different things. My army has to face the other 3 countries as enemies. The continuous war has put a lot of pressure on all aspects of the country. We will win. Of course we will. As long as Tianjing Basin was stabilized, there would be nothing to worry about. The Qin nation and the Yun nation wouldn't pose too much of a threat to them. They only had to be careful of Great Xia. However, we don't need to face the entire Great Xia, just one of their armies. As long as we accumulate our strength and wait for Great Xia to extend its claws again, we can quickly cut them off. At that time, Great Xia will be in chaos, Rinpochen said. We have radio stations and walkie-talkies. We can contact various places on the battlefield at any time and keep abreast of the situation in various places. Whether it's the command and deployment of the nation's armies or the command of the generals and soldiers, we can command them with ease. We have binoculars and drones. Similarly, in terms of reconnaissance, we can figure out the other party's every move in advance. Coupled with the walkie-talkies, we can easily find and defeat the other party's weaknesses. Most importantly, we have brave soldiers who can fight 10 enemies at once. As long as the logistics can be guaranteed, there's no reason for us to lose, Rinpochen said resolutely. You're right. The Empress nodded. If it was before, 100 million taels of silver would have been enough for me to make up my mind. However, I always feel that with you around, 100 million taels of silver isn't an unattainable figure. Am I right? The Empress smiled, which was rare for her. She smiled very happily. Your Majesty is right. Ren Baqian smiled as well. The Empress's trust in him made him feel very warm. Both of them looked at each other and smiled. Under this tranquil moonlight, both of them felt very relaxed. Nighttime allowed people to let go of a lot of things. Ren Baqian twisted his body and sat beside the Empress. Both of their shoulders gently leaned against each other. Ren Baqian took a whiff of the Empress's strong fragrance of tuberose and used his fingers to brush aside a strand of her hair. The Empress didn't mind such an intimate action anymore. Both of their hearts were very soft. It was as if they were the only two people in the world. The sounds of birds and beasts in the distance seemed to have disappeared. On the contrary, a few guards not far away looked at both of them from time to time before looking up at the sky. Today's moonlight was really beautiful. There's the smell of red braised meat on your body. I'm hungry. The Empress suddenly used her shoulder to nudge him and said, Ren Baqian, Your Majesty, do you know that you're spoiling the mood? Give me back that gentle and charming atmosphere just now. Ren Baqian looked at the Empress for a long time, but she didn't feel guilty at all. She looked at him confidently with a face that said, I'm hungry, go and cook. After looking at each other for a long time, Ren Baqian couldn't help but admit defeat. He sighed and asked the soldiers to clear away the unfinished meat for him to roast for the Empress. The Empress looked at his busy back and smiled again. Her smile was a little sweet. This was a smile that Ren Baqian had never seen before. Unfortunately, he didn't see it because his back was facing the Empress. I'm hungry too. Lin Xiaola squatted on a tree and said. The two of them were too smelly, but they didn't feel it. She couldn't bear it anymore and could only hide far away. After eating supper, the Empress rested on a wooden couch that emitted a fragrant smell of wood. Ren Baqian lay on the lawn not far away and looked at the night sky. Unknowingly, he had fallen into a deep sleep. He dreamed of his wedding with the Empress, dreamed of entering the bridal chamber. Ren Baqian was filled with excitement. The Empress blushed shyly and wanted to reject him. Half of her breasts were exposed. At this moment, he was awakened by the crisp chirping of a bird. Ren Baqian opened his eyes abruptly. The sky had already started to brighten. He wanted to close his eyes and continue dreaming, but he realized that he couldn't continue at all. Furthermore, the dream was getting more and more blurry. Damn it, just a little more. Ren Baqian's face turned black. Just a little more, just a little more, just a little more, just a little more. He inadvertently turned his head to look at the Empress and saw her leaning on the wooden couch, looking at him with clear eyes. He didn't know if she hadn't slept for the whole night or just woke up. I feel that you are thinking of some disrespectful ideas, the Empress said. Your Majesty, I'm more wronged than Do-yi, Ren Baqian said with an aggrieved look. He conveniently changed his posture and bent down to hide something. If the Empress knew about his dream, he would really be hung on the southeast branch. The Empress curled her lips and ignored him. It's daybreak. Let's begin to reel in the net. Ren Baqian said. The harvest would depend on this net. The others were still fine, but it was better to capture the people from the southern metropolis and the green bellflower as soon as possible. Shi Wanya sat on the saber-toothed tiger and ordered, send 40 teams with 20 people each. Spread out and search. If you discover any enemies, immediately shout and contact me. Following the response, more than 1,000 people immediately spread out and began to search along the farmland on both sides of the dirt road. The rest of the people followed behind Shi Wanya as they slowly made their way toward Wu City. Not long after, Ren Baqian looked into the distance with a bloody smile on his face and said, There's prey. Chapter 473. Early in the morning, Ren Baqian sat in front of the bonfire and used the left and right interfighting technique to roast 2 jumping goats. These goats were very small in size, but their movements were very fast. Furthermore, their hooves could even break the skulls of ferocious beasts and were considered to be relatively rare prey. For the past 2 days, the ordinary soldiers had been eating baby asps. Baby asps could be seen everywhere in groups. They had the appearance of rabbits but the habits of wolves. They didn't taste good and their meat was a little astringent. In ancient times, there were some generals who loved their soldiers and would eat and live together with them. However, Rinpoche wasn't a general and neither was the empress. Naturally, he wouldn't let himself suffer. A thin and slightly hunchbacked old man in a green robe slowly walked over from afar. The old man's hair was completely white, and his body emitted a withering aura. His movements were not fast, as if he was walking on the verge of death. When the students and dozens of soldiers who were preparing breakfast noticed them, they immediately became vigilant. They're enemies. The soldiers drew their weapons. This old man is not here to fight. I merely wish to chat a little, said the old man. Shurgan. Rinpoche gestured for Shurgan to come over and take the breakfast that was being roasted. He wiped the dust off his hands, nodded to the empress, and walked over to the old man. Qingyun soared. Rinpoche didn't expect him to actually come over. Furthermore, he came alone and wanted to have a chat with him. However, he could guess what the other party wanted to ask. Rinpoche stopped tens of meters away from Qingyun's sword and looked at him. His complexion was completely different from when they first met. Back then, although his hair was also white, and one could roughly tell his age, his complexion was extremely good. After all, even if a spirit wheel expert was 100 years old, it wouldn't be a problem for him to live for another 30 to 50 years. Furthermore, he would only rapidly deteriorate 1 year before his death. But at this moment, his body was withered, and he seemed to have aged more than 20 years. You didn't expect this, did you? Qingyun sword asked. Rinpoche nodded honestly. He really didn't expect this. I didn't expect that either, Qingyun sword said bleakly. Indeed, he didn't expect Rinpoche to be a spy. He also didn't expect the envoy from Great Xia to collude with Rinpoche and report to him. When he heard the news, he was at a loss for a long time. He didn't know what was going on in this world. What support? What uprising? It all sounded like a joke. The things that happened between countries and in the imperial court were not something that people of the Jianghu like them could understand. They were just hot-blooded people, but they were like fools, doing things that many people thought were very stupid. Qingyun's sword stood there for a long time, then spoke again. I want to ask you something. Tell me the truth. They all call me an honest and adorable husband. Rinpoche replied sincerely. Qingyun's sword looked at him deeply. Honest and adorable. Honest and adorable. He had been deceived by this person. If we lose, how will you treat the people here? Qingyun's sword asked slowly. This was his goal for coming here. This matter was too big. They were trying to kill the empress. If he succeeded, as long as he could fend off the vengeance of the Protectorate of the South, he would be able to counterattack. However, if they failed, then with the habits of the Aboriginals, the only thing they would do would be to roll their heads. The people of Tianjing Basin were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Therefore, he came here to try to persuade Rinpoche to let those innocent people go. This was the only thing he could do after everything he had planned failed due to a blind impulse. Victory. He still had this idea before, but it was gone now. Even the emissary of Great Xia and the Aboriginals were colluding. He didn't know if what he and his people were doing was a farce in the eyes of others. Su Qing's betrayal was a huge blow to him. As I said, you guys are too anxious? Rinpoche said as he looked around, found a rock, and sat down. That's why I'm here. In fact, you guys and the Aboriginals aren't irreconcilable enemies. It's not that this world can't accommodate two races living together. Of course, the Aboriginals don't have enough brains, so there hasn't been a good arrangement for you guys all these years. Of course, you guys, those who survived 70 years ago, aren't at ease. Over the decades, the relationship between the two parties has worsened. In fact, it's precisely because the Aboriginals don't have enough brains that you guys can actually do a lot of things. Economy, culture, scientific research, and many other aspects. You guys can play a considerable role in many aspects. You guys complement each other. The Aboriginals have martial arts but no brains. You guys don't have martial arts or brains, but your brains are still a little better than the Aboriginals. In the distance, the Empress picked up a stone and flew toward them. Qingyun's sword caught it, looked in the Empress's direction, and said to Rinpoche, "Your position in the Aboriginals is higher than I thought." If it was someone else who directly criticized the Aboriginals' brains in front of Qi Zixiao, they would probably have been buried by now. However, Qi Zixiao couldn't bear to throw a stone at him. Instead, she threw a stone at herself as a warning. Although this action was a little girlish, it showed how important he was to Qi Zixiao. "Go on, I'm all ears," Qingyun Sword said. When he first met the Empress, Renbaqian seemed to have said this, but no one could or was willing to listen. Even if he said it, they wouldn't believe him. Now that he knew the final outcome, he let go of everything and calmed down to listen. This in itself was a very sad thing. "This time, I'm here to deal with this matter and let you guys go out. First, let a small group of people who are more stable go out to do business or do other things. Interact with the Aboriginals, let the ordinary Aboriginals understand you, and let you understand the ordinary Aboriginals. Both sides will understand each other through interaction and treat each other fairly instead of being full of prejudice. After the first step is achieved, the rest will be gradually released. Of course, this will take some time, but as time passes, you guys will live under the same sky as the Aboriginals. My goal will be achieved and so will yours." "Really?" Qingyun Sword's voice trembled slightly. How could the expectations of so many people for decades be achieved so easily? "There's no need to lie to you. What you see is so small. It's like looking at the sky through the mouth of a well. And what I see is much more than what you guys see. There's also a lot more demand for all kinds of talents. In the future, Dayo will no longer be a country that is useless except for war. Instead, its economy, culture, and education will be far superior to this era. It will be the center of this world. I need talents, a lot of talents in education, economics, scientific research, planning, and manufacturing. Only a lot of talents can achieve the vision that Her Majesty and I have. Even in Tianjin Basin, I will make education universal so that every child can go to school and become the talents that I need. Then, they will enter various positions that require them to play a role. After 10, 20, or 30 years, there will even be officials from Tianjin Basin entering the imperial court." Qingyun Sword didn't speak for a long time. He didn't quite believe it. If the Aboriginals and the people of Tianjin Basin could live peacefully under the same sky, it might really be achieved in a few decades if it was really as Renbaqian said. He found it hard to believe that the children of Tianjin Basin could go to school and learn knowledge. This was something that had never happened in previous dynasties. Even with the wealth of Great Xia, it was still impossible to achieve. As for the other things, he didn't understand at all. It sounded like the person in front of him and Qi Zixiao had a huge plan that included many aspects. However, he didn't know or imagine what this plan was. Make Dayo the center of this world? These words seemed to be sleep-talking. However, looking at the other party's high-spirited appearance, it seemed that this was really his plan. The most important thing was that he was relieved. It seemed that the other party really didn't intend to kill them all. In that case, there was no need to say those words that he had previously thought of. Chapter 474. Renbaqian still hoped that Qingyun Sword would surrender. As the chief of the Hidden Village and the leader of the Hidden Alliance, it would be extremely helpful to pacify Tianjin Basin if he surrendered. Furthermore, he wasn't an ambitious person. His greatest wish was for the people of Tianjin Basin to be able to leave this place. Renbaqian actually didn't want to exterminate all the sects and clans. Those who hadn't made up their minds were the people from the three major powers. This was because the others were people from the underworld, didn't control power, couldn't motivate people, and didn't aim for the imperial court. Even if they stayed, they wouldn't cause too much trouble. As for the people from the three major powers, they were completely different from them. They were the rulers of Tianjin Basin, which was equivalent to a country within a country. Their thoughts were more complicated and had more ideas. Therefore, Renbaqian still had to consider whether these people could stay. Qingyun Sword didn't give Renbaqian an answer. After listening to Renbaqian, he cupped his fists and turned to leave. Before coming here, he only wanted to hear the truth from Renbaqian and then live and die together with Wu City. However, Renbaqian's words made his heart waver. Surrender was easy to say. However, he had gathered so many people and lost so many people. Could he really surrender so easily? What face did he have to face the others? At this time, surrendering was a more difficult choice than death. It was easy to die. Once he died, he could leave a good reputation that would be spread among the people of Tianjing Basin and even be written down. However, if he surrendered, he would have to bear countless curses and his reputation would be ruined. He wouldn't have the face to meet others after death just to see the future that Rinpoche spoke of. He couldn't decide between these two choices. Seeing that Qingyun's sword had gone far away, Rinpoche shook his head, turned around, and took the roasted jumping goat from Shurgan. After eating breakfast, Rinpoche thought for a while and asked Shurgan and Lin Xiaola to wait near Wu City to prevent the winged cavalry from arriving early and massacring the entire city. Shurgan was quite talented. At such a young age, he was already at the Kismet Heaven level, which was equivalent to an Earth Wheel expert. He was also quick-witted. If there were other Spirit Wheel experts in Wu City who could slap him to death, it would be too unjust. As for Lin Xiaola, if she were to go alone, she would probably wake up to find that the rocket developed by Dayo had already flown out of the planet. After sending the two of them out, Rinpoche recalled his previous question. He turned around and asked the Empress, "Your Majesty, what is the name of our planet?" The Empress looked at him in a daze. "Look, our country and the world are all on a planet called Earth. What about here?" The Empress pondered deeply and said, "Dayo Ball." Rinpoche's face was filled with question marks. "Your Majesty, can you please be more attentive? Why don't we call it 8,000 balls?" After Rinpoche finished speaking, he looked at the Empress's face and immediately changed his mind. 8 purple balls? Hey, Your Majesty, I suddenly thought of a suitable name. Let's call it Zixiao Star. The Empress's gloomy face immediately brightened up. This is it. It felt good to have a planet named after her. What if the planet is square? The Empress raised a very serious question. Rinpoche pondered for a long time. Would Fong's planet appear? It wouldn't be a planet then, it would be Minecraft. This question was a little difficult for someone who used to be a bad student like him. Also, there's a star in the sky that belongs to me. Wouldn't that be the same name? The Empress still remembered that everyone corresponded to a star. Although this was just a beautiful story, she treated it as true. Zixiao Star and Zixiao Ball. Pow! Zixiao Heavenly Star and Zixiao Earth Star. Very much to my liking. The Empress's gloomy face brightened up again. Your Majesty, do you think there are other continents outside of this one? After we conquer the Yun nation, we will build a ship and send people out to see how big this world is. Rinpoche said nonchalantly with his swollen hands. But the two of them imagined the original appearance of this world for a while. In the afternoon, they heard the sound of hooves and stirring up dust in the distance. Nearly 1,000 riders rushed over from afar and stopped in unison. They got off their mounts, cupped their fists, and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Although there were only 1,000 riders, their momentum was comparable to that of an army. Every rider exuded a valiant, powerful, and bloody aura from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. The Empress stood up and looked at the warriors in front of her, whose leather armor was covered with various scars. It was these people who had gone deep into Great Xia when Rinpoche went there. During the war with Great Xia, these people acted as the blade and entered Great Xia again after the war. After returning to Dayo, they rushed here without stopping. Out of the 1,500 people, only about 900 were left. The Empress's gaze swept across everyone's faces before saying faintly, "Take a rest first." "Yes, Your Majesty." The Empress called for the captain of the winged cavalry to inquire about the situation in Great Xia. The captain of the winged cavalry was a burly man with a big beard. His name was Gong Zheng, and they were familiar with each other when they were in the north. Rinpoche heard an interesting story. Li Qinxiu actually kidnapped a few so-called scholars in Dayo and brought their families back under their bitter pleas. County Commandant Gong, where are those people? Rinpoche was very interested in these scholars. He didn't have the prejudice that the Aboriginals had against people from other countries. After all, Earth was a global village and he could see people everywhere. Principal Ren, I don't know about this. Rinpoche nodded. It seemed like he had to go back and ask Li Qinxiu. Fortunately, he had sent Shurgan over in advance. Otherwise, Wu City would have been filled with people by now. It wasn't until late at night that Shi Wanya returned with his army. Among them were dozens of half-dead captives who were covered in blood. These captives were thrown down from their mounts. When they realized that there was another army besides the Protectorate of the South, the Winged Cavalry, their faces were filled with despair. The Winged Cavalry had indeed arrived. "Your Majesty, the other party has spirit wheel experts, and we only managed to capture 23 people," Shi Wanya reported as he strode to the Empress. It was slightly less than Rinpochen had expected, but capturing one was still good. Carrying the torch, he went to the captives who were surrounded in the middle and sized them up. There were 2 ladies from the Full Star Pavilion, a few people from the Green Bellflower, and an old man whom he had met in the hidden village. There were also some people from other sects of various sizes. There were no people from the Golden Ring residence or the girl who had learned the Eru from him for half a month. Everyone was covered in blood and injuries. Some of them had twisted limbs, and some were even missing 1 or 2 limbs. It seemed like they had been captured after a bloody battle. When everyone saw Rinpochen under the torch, they glared at him. A woman from the Manxing Pavilion spat a mouthful of blood right in front of Rinpochen's shoes. Immediately, a soldier went over and kicked her blood-stained but still pretty face. She flew backward and spat out blood, as well as her teeth in midair. "I want them alive," Rinpochen shouted. "Split up and watch them. If anyone tries to escape, break their legs and keep them alive," Rinpochen instructed before turning around and leaving. Everyone looked at him with murderous eyes. If looks could kill, Rinpochen would have been dead by now. The night passed. After breakfast the next day, Rinpochen ordered his men to carry the captives to Wu City. He threw the captives on the ground in front of the city wall so that the people could see them clearly. Rinpochen then ordered his men to shout, "People in the city, listen up. People in the city, listen up. You've been surrounded. Surrender is your only way out." Chapter 475. You have already won. "Let them go and exchange my life for theirs," Qingyun Sword said as he appeared at the top of the city wall. "Village Chief. Senior." Regardless of whether it was above or below the city wall, everyone was sorrowful and moved. Qingyun Sword was a spirit wheel expert, yet he was willing to exchange his life for the lives of those earth wheel and man wheel experts. This almost made everyone cry. Rinpochen pondered whether this old man couldn't bring himself to surrender and wanted Rinpochen to give him a way out of this embarrassing situation. Of course, thinking this way might be a little narrow-minded. After all, these people came here with the intention to die. However, this old man's lifelong wish was for the people of Tianjing Basin to be able to leave this place. Since Rinpochen had already told him all this, wouldn't he want to see if Rinpochen could do what he said? After all, this was his lifelong wish, and it was so close at hand. If it were Rinpochen, he would definitely want to see it happen. Besides, what was the use of letting these 20 people go? Wasn't he worried that Rinpochen would massacre Wu City? Rinpochen might not be able to do it, but Shi Wanya definitely could. Just the fact that they besieged the Empress was enough to exterminate the entire city. Rinpochen pondered for a while and decided to give him a way out of this embarrassing situation. He stepped forward and said, "Did you see that? There are 1,000 brothers behind me, and 1,000 super brothers are waiting for you in high spirits." The 2,000 burly men behind him bulged their muscles as if to annotate Rinpochen's words. Of course, if they knew what brothers meant, they wouldn't have this expression. "Surrender. Open the gates and surrender now, and there won't be a massacre. This is the only way for you to survive. Otherwise, these people and the people of Wu City will die, including you. Including you. You can only die if I want you to. I won't let you die, but if someone dies, what awaits you is a massacre." "Oh, wrong. You can only die if Her Majesty wants you to die." Qingyun Sword stood on the city wall in silence for a long time before looking up at the sky and sighing. It was a heroic, stirring, and lonely scene. He acted as if it was real. The more Rinpochen looked at him, the more he felt that he was acting. "Open the gates," Qingyun Sword said in a deep voice. "Village Chief? Open!" Qingyun Sword shouted. A moment later, the city gates slowly opened. A group of people stood at the gate, their eyes filled with anger. Although they had already known that they had lost this battle 2 days ago, using a massacre to threaten them was truly despicable. "Go, tie them up," Rinpoche said to the people beside him. "You're going too far," someone shouted angrily. "Let them tie him up. A loss was a loss. There's no need to implicate those innocent people," Qing Yun's sword said calmly. His voice was devoid of emotion. Only those who were familiar with him would be able to hear the sorrow in his voice. No matter what, he had surrendered. No matter how many excuses he had, he couldn't hide from the bottom of his heart that he had let down those who had died. Although everyone was furious, they knew that resistance was useless at this moment. The situation was already lost. Since the winged cavalry was already here, they would only die even if they resisted. They might even infuriate the other party and cause them to massacre the entire city. He steeled his heart and no longer resisted. The rope used to tie people up was made from vines soaked in animal oil. It was extremely tough, and the more one struggled, the tighter the rope became, to the point that it could even cut into the flesh. Even an earthwheel expert wouldn't be able to escape if he was tied up. However, this kind of rope wasn't enough to deal with a spirit wheel expert. This was because a spirit wheel expert could use their spirit and even condense heaven-grade weapons. There were many ways to break the rope. After waiting for everyone to be tied up, Rinpoche pinched his nose and walked to the front of everyone to look at their faces. There weren't many people left, only a dozen or so, and they were all from the hidden village. Qing Yun's sword was the only spirit wheel expert. "What about the others?" Rinpoche asked. "Don't you already know?" Qing Yun's sword was the only one who was not tied up. He looked at the captives they had captured last night and sighed. "Don't play any more tricks, or else even the gods won't be able to save you," Rinpoche reminded. "There's no need," Qing Yun's sword said faintly. He had 1,000 earthwheel experts and 4 spirit wheel experts. Qi Zixiao was also a top-notch expert. At this moment, even if all the experts in Tianjing Basin who were at their peak were gathered here, they still wouldn't be a match for him. Furthermore, more than half of the experts in Tianjing Basin had already died. Rinpoche returned to the Empress's seat and said, "Your Majesty, please enter the city." "Enter the city." The Empress waved her hand. Then she lowered her voice and asked Rinpoche, "Is the smell still there?" Rinpoche felt a toothache. He had brought this upon himself. "Your Majesty, please bear with it. In fact, the smell on these people is the main point," Rinpoche whispered. The Empress also felt a toothache when she heard this. Even so, they still had to enter the city. The winged cavalry was divided into 2 groups with the Empress in the middle. When passing by the city gate, the Empress didn't look at the people who were tied up. To her, these people were never her match and were just some restless rebels. Now that Rinpoche was handling them, she couldn't be bothered to look at them. This made the people who were tied up feel an indescribable feeling. The other party actually didn't even bother to look at them. The people from the Protectorate of the South followed behind. After entering the city, they immediately dispersed to look after the guards in the city, and a portion of them went to guard the city gate. The streets were very quiet. Occasionally, the sound of children crying could be heard from the houses on both sides of the street, but it was immediately covered up. The moment the winged cavalry entered the city, everyone ran back home and prayed for their own fate. They also peeked through the cracks of the windows to observe this world-famous army and the Empress of Dayo. After passing through half of the city, everyone arrived at the warlord's residence. Rinpoche went in first, walked around, and then came out while covering his nose. This place used to be the base camp of those people, and the smell was extremely strong. He got someone to find a big house nearby that didn't have any smell and chased the people out. This house would be the Empress's temporary residence. "I'm going to take a bath. I'll leave the rest to you." Qing Yuan. The Empress entered the house and walked in while talking. Halfway through, she suddenly remembered that Qing Yuan and Hong Luan were still on Earth. "Bring the 2 of them back tonight." "Your Majesty, there isn't anyone who can use this place now. Do you want me to boil some water for you to take a bath?" Rinpoche asked. After Rinpoche finished speaking, he felt the Empress stepping on his foot. He felt that his big toe was cracked. He gasped while holding his foot. Seeing that Gong Zheng and a few guards were looking at him, Rinpoche glared back. Everyone immediately gave him a thumbs up. Find a room. I'm going to rest. I haven't slept well these past 2 days. Yes. I've already ordered people to clean up. Rinpoche limped and gritted his teeth as he followed behind the Empress. Go and do your work. The Empress waved her hand when they arrived. Rinpoche watched the Empress enter the room before turning to the hall and ordering people to bring in Qingyun's sword and the others, as well as the captives from last night. He sat on a wooden chair in the hall. The back of the chair was curved, and there was a bit of an ergonomic feel to it. There was even a pillow behind the waist. It made him feel very comfortable when he sat on it. This made Rinpoche think highly of these remnant citizens of Tianjing Basin. Go and ask the original owners of this place who made this chair and bring them here, Rinpoche said to the guards beside him. It just so happened that he lacked a carpenter who could make sofas and chairs. Then, he looked pensive as if something was missing. After a long time, Qingyun's sword and the others were brought into the hall. Looking at Rinpoche's pensive expression, they began to guess how he was going to deal with them. Rinpoche thought for a long time and suddenly realized why he felt that something was missing. It seemed like someone was missing. Where did that last Lin Shaola go? Did he call her when he left this morning? Lin Shaola squatted on a branch and looked at the messy ground with a dumbfounded look on her face. Chapter 476. In the future, you can go out and see if it's really as I said. There's no need for me to lie to you. I'm an official and you're bandits. Lying to you won't do me any good. If you rebel again, I'll have to bear the responsibility. After all, I'm in charge of Tianjing Basin now. Beheading all of you will be the end of it. It won't take more than a few months for the winged cavalry to wipe out all the sects from the north to the south. However, I'm sure you can imagine the scene. Heads will roll. However, in my opinion, there's no need for that. In fact, I wanted to kill all of you at first so that Tianjing Basin would be stable. Without anyone taking the lead, the remaining people wouldn't be able to stir up any waves. However, after interacting with you for a while, I changed my mind. You're just some people from the martial arts world. You don't have such big ambitions and don't want to be kings or emperors. Your biggest wish is to go out. It doesn't matter if you have nothing better to do, set up a monastery, teach disciples, and occasionally fight with people. These are all trivial matters. No matter how good you are at fighting, can you defeat Her Majesty? Can you defeat the officials in the imperial court? As long as you can be stable, it's not a bad idea to keep you around. Keeping you around will also make it easier to stabilize Tianjing Basin. Everyone here is also Her Majesty's people and will be of use to her in the future. There's no need to kill to increase hatred. In addition, I'm afraid of blood, and I'm afraid of seeing heads rolling on the ground. Therefore, I'm giving you a chance to live. It's also a chance for others to live. Go back and think about it. Someone, take them away and let them think about it. Rinpoche repeated what he had said to Qingyun's sword. Then, he rambled on for a long time as if he was babbling. After he finished speaking, he asked someone to take them back to think about it. Principal Ren, why go through so much trouble? Just like what Sir said, everything will be stable after we kill all of them, Gong Zheng said. That would be great, but to pacify Tianjing Basin, we'll have to put in more effort. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, in the future, the system of Tianjing Basin needs to be changed. With them around, many things will be much easier. Moreover, if they had never met before, it was just some numbers. Killing them was not a big deal. He had come into contact with many people, and they had all become living people in his mind. They had become a part of his memories, so he would keep them if there was no need. In just 1 year, Rinpoche had risen from an ordinary person to a high position, and then from an ordinary person to a man-will expert. These sudden changes affected his mentality very easily. Previously, he had experienced a life-and-death assassination. He had been poisoned. He had gone to a certain organization to steal a biological weapon. He had been on the battlefield. He had seen corpses and heads rolling on the ground. He had killed more than one person with his own hands. He had even left the country to escape for his life. Everything he had experienced in the past year reeked of blood. The Empress and the other aboriginals whom he interacted with usually treated killing as something as simple as eating and drinking. These experiences had made his killing intent very strong. Even if an ordinary person became rich overnight, their mentality would change, not to mention what he had experienced. Only with the passage of time would his temperament gradually calm down. The people of Tianjin Basin should be thanking that lass. A few days ago, he had been in contact with that naive and sweet lass, which calmed his mentality a lot. In any case, she was his successor in the Eru world. She was also pitiful and innocent, and he didn't want to see her wandering outside for the rest of her life while carrying the hatred of her country and family. Moreover, if that naive and sweet lass were to wander outside, she would probably be sold to a brothel in a few days. After more than 2 hours, Rinpochian finally saw Lin Xiaola coming in from outside. Rinpochian thought that she would scratch him. After all, he had thrown her to Mount Wu. He didn't expect her to yawn and find an empty house in the backyard to sleep in. It seemed like there was nothing more important than sleeping in her heart. After standing there for a while, Rinpochian went to look for Shiwanya and asked him to mobilize another 5,000 soldiers from the Protectorate of the South into Tianjin Basin. At the same time, he contacted Li Qianxiu and asked him to send the 3 kidnapped people from Great Xia to Tianjin Basin. Since they had asked Shiwanya to kidnap their families to Dayo, it meant that they had given up on returning to Great Xia in the future. These 3 people could be of some use. At the very least, they could mix some sand into Tianjin Basin. In a large room that looked like a warehouse, it was a little cold and gloomy, and it was more than enough to fit more than 40 people inside. Do you think his words can be trusted? A woman twisted her body and leaned against the wall. This position was much more comfortable. As soon as the Aboriginal soldiers left, she couldn't help but speak up. I don't believe a word that the thief said. Just like what he said, what's the benefit of lying to us? Maybe there's some conspiracy behind it. I don't think he's lying. Someone said. Firstly, we are all in his hands and have no control over our lives. There's no need for him to lie to us in this aspect. On the other hand, he's also an outsider to the Aboriginals. As soon as this was said, everyone looked at him. He's an outsider. Even though he was chosen as Qi Zixiao's husband, all his power is based on her intentions. He has no foundation in Dayo's imperial court and won't be accepted by anyone. Qi Zixiao can knock him down to the ground with just a thought. What do you mean? He wants to cultivate his own power, a power that doesn't belong to the Aboriginals, to stabilize his position. No one is willing to hand everything over to others. The person who spoke was also a woman in a brocade dress. One of her legs was broken and dragged in a twisted shape. However, she didn't care about the pain in her leg and analyzed the situation for everyone. Whether it's to let the people of Tianjin Basin leave or to recruit us, it's all based on this. He wants to disrupt the current internal situation in Dayo. If we want to stand firm, we need to rely on him. If he wants to stabilize his position, he also needs support. Will the Aboriginals support him? We are the only ones who have this possibility. As soon as this was said, everyone became pensive. If this was the case, the possibility wasn't small. No matter what, they and I won't take it lying down. My master and junior died in their hands. If I can't avenge them, am I still human? A man who was missing an arm said while lying on the ground. His eyes were full of resentment. Rinpochian returned to Earth in the afternoon. As soon as he returned to the living room, he heard the sound of a television. He saw the 2 girls, Qing Yuan and Hong Luan, sitting on the sofa with chips in their hands, wiping their tears as they watched a television series. It was a Korean drama. On the television, 2 people were separated by life and death. Principal Ren, why do they always get terminal illnesses? Why can't the doctors cure them? Why can't the 2 of them be together? The terminal illnesses here are really cruel. They are so pitiful. Listening to these 2 people, it was obvious that they hadn't just watched a television series these few days. Most of the Aboriginals died of old age or in battle. Very few of them died on their sickbeds. Rinpochian thought for a while and said, because they eat too much kimchi. That thing causes cancer. After finishing his sentence, Renbachien turned his head and saw Shen Feng with a swollen face and a bloody nose. She stood there obediently with her hands in front of her, looking at Renbachien with tears in her eyes. "What happened to you?" Renbachien was startled. Shen Feng didn't just look wronged, but sullen. Chapter 477. Renbachien looked at Shen Feng and didn't need to guess to know that she was beaten up by Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. After asking a few questions, he found out what had happened. This house was empty more than half the time, so Shen Feng would sometimes come to check on the progress of the cleaning. It was the same this time. The moment the cleaner left, Shen Feng came and was beaten to the ground by the two as soon as she entered the house. Actually, Shen Feng was quite skilled. Renbachien guessed that she had a special status after all, but she was beaten black and blue before she could even get close to them. According to them, this was the temporary imperial residence of Her Majesty, and anyone who dared to enter without her permission would be sentenced to death. Even though she brought up Renbachien, they insisted on waiting for him to return before dealing with her. No matter what she said, they wouldn't listen. Then, Shen Feng was forced to order 2 KFC family buckets for them. If she didn't do as they said, she would be beaten up again. It had been 2 days. Shen Feng was first beaten up and then locked up here for 2 days. She had to eat KFC soybean milk and youtiao every day, plus 2 meals of family buckets. Shen Feng was about to go crazy. After hearing what Shen Feng said, Renbachien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He turned to look at them and saw that they were looking at him without any guilt. "Go back first and recuperate well. Your salary will be doubled this month." Renbachien asked Shen Feng to leave before looking at them and asking, "Did you two beat her up and lock her up here for the KFC family buckets?" "How is that possible?" they said in unison with a guilty conscience. "That thing on TV doesn't look delicious." Renbachien was speechless. Sure enough, Dayo was of the same origin from top to bottom. When they could talk with their fists, they wouldn't use their brains. Every one of them counted, and there was no exception. If their brains were opened, they would probably find a miracle in modern biology. There were only muscles and no brain matter inside. "When are we going back?" they asked again. They were immersed in the sadness brought about by the aftereffects of instant noodles and finally remembered that they were still in a foreign land. As for whether the Empress had won, they didn't ask. In their hearts, the Empress was the strongest in the world. Furthermore, the fact that Renbachien was back in one piece meant everything. "Both of you will return with me in a few days," Renbachien said as he went upstairs to change his clothes. After a while, Renbachien said, "Let's go out for a meal." Thinking about how the two of them had come to this world, he couldn't let them stay in this cold house forever. Both of them were overjoyed when they heard Renbachien's words. Both of them had long been interested in the world they had seen on television. However, from this house, they could only see houses and forests in the distance. It was nothing like the liveliness they had seen on television. Renbachien picked up his phone and wanted to give Shen Feng a call. After thinking about it, he simply went online and found a local shop. Then, he paid a high price to get someone to deliver clothes for them to try on. 2 hours later, the two people in front of him had completely changed their appearances. Qing Yuan was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, while Hong Luan was wearing a blue mid-length dress. Both of them had their hair down. Although their temperaments were a little special and their hair was too long, they looked less conspicuous. On the way from the villa to the city, the two of them sat in the car like curious babies. They were curious about everything, and their faces were almost poking at the car window. Especially Qing Yuan, there was hardly a moment of peace along the way. Renbachien casually answered their questions as he drove. By the time they arrived at the city, it was already evening. The sky was starting to darken, and the street lights and shop lights were lit up. The sight of gold and jade made the two of them gasp in admiration. Just by looking at the splendid and bustling scene in the city, the two of them thought that they had arrived at the world of immortals. At least, compared to the other world where there was nothing, this place was no different from the world of immortals. However, the people here were a little weak and could be slapped down, just like Principal Ren. Now, Principal Ren was more or less stronger and was at least as strong as an ordinary person. In the past, he was like a paper man that could be blown away by the wind. After finding a well-decorated restaurant, the two of them finally had some peace and quiet. After they finished eating and licked their plates clean, Qing Yuan faintly said, "It's not as delicious as the KFC family bucket." Then she cautiously asked, "Is the KFC family bucket very expensive?" Ren Baqian almost vomited blood. Could it be that the two of them felt that the KFC family bucket was too expensive and couldn't bear to part with it, so they brought them here to eat it? "When we get back, I will bury the two of you with the KFC family bucket," Ren Baqian said hatefully. After the meal, Ren Baqian brought the two of them around the city to show them the luxury they had never seen before. The two of them marveled at everything they saw, and passers-by couldn't help but take a few more glances. After all, how could such beautiful ladies come out of the mountains? Furthermore, there were two of them. In Ren Baqian's opinion, Deo was much more remote and poor than the mountains. These days, there were still televisions and mobile phones in the mountains. For the next few days, Ren Baqian brought the two of them out from time to time or read some Buddhist scriptures. He always had an idea to spread some of the teachings of Buddhism to Tianjin Basin. After all, when it came to Buddhism, the first thing that came to everyone's mind was to have no desires, to have a pure mind, to lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot, to have good fortune in this life, and to be rewarded in the next life. These teachings were very suitable to be spread to the commoners of Tianjin Basin. After all, one couldn't rely on the hearts of the people, and religion was also a very useful tool. If everyone had no desires, was pure and wholeheartedly did good deeds without harming their own lives, the world would be peaceful. However, after reading some of the scriptures, he realized that Buddhism was different from what he had in mind. In fact, Buddhism was also a kind of cultivation in order to transcend and reach the eternal realm. The main purpose was still to cultivate in this life. If one couldn't achieve it in this life, they would then cultivate in the next life. Why did everyone think that cultivating in the next life was the main goal? It was because most of the people in the world were ordinary people who didn't focus on cultivation, didn't have great perseverance, and didn't have a good foundation of understanding. Therefore, they could only come into contact with this kind of method. At the same time, this was also in line with the beautiful expectations that ordinary people had for the future. After reading for a few days, Ren Baqian became somewhat interested. At the same time, he had more thoughts of spreading Buddhism over. After all, it wasn't a bad thing to spread a religion that taught people to do good deeds. However, what made him hesitate was whether to spread the original Buddhism or to modify it before spreading it. The original Buddhism teachings were ultimately still about cultivation. After modifying it, it would be easier to control the part that focused on accumulating good fortune in the next life. However, there would also be more loopholes and wouldn't be able to withstand scrutiny. After staying for a few days, Ren Baqian brought the two of them back. Qing Yuan and Hong Luan were still a little reluctant to part with them. Chapter 478. As soon as the three of them returned to Deyo, both of them went out to look for the Empress. However, when the guard at the door saw Qing Yuan and Hong Luan coming out of Ren Baqian's room, he looked at Ren Baqian as though he was looking at a beast. Ren Baqian carried a bucket of porridge to the backyard and waited for a long time. After eating breakfast with the Empress, he asked someone to bring Qing Yun's sword to the main hall. After a while, Ren Baqian saw Qing Yun's sword in the hall. He saw that Qing Yun's sword had aged even more. Ren Baqian was worried that Qing Yun's sword would suddenly die one day. "How is it? Have you made up your mind?" Ren Baqian asked from his seat of honor. "What do you want me to do?" Qing Yun's sword asked. "The spiritual mountain sect isn't far from here. Go and persuade them to surrender. Of course, someone will go with you. It would be best if they could surrender. If not, I can't keep these troublemakers who are causing chaos in Tianjin Basin." Sealing the mountain, the spiritual mountain sect was not spared. "Their lives will depend on you," Ren Baqian said leisurely as he crossed his legs. Qing Yun's sword's expression became even more bitter. His reputation for the rest of his life would probably be ruined. Even if he didn't go, the other party would definitely send someone else. However, it was not difficult for the entire spiritual mountain sect to surrender. It was better for him to make a trip there himself and understand the pros and cons. Perhaps he could persuade them. I promise you. Qing Yun's sword sighed. A wise man submits to circumstances. With your status, I'm sure you won't go back on your words. I won't play any other tricks. I'll make some arrangements in a while, and then you can set off. I have another question. Qing Yun's sword raised his head and looked at Rinpoche. Speak. What's the background of the lady beside you? Qing Yun's sword stared at Rinpoche and asked. His master's death had always been a thorn in his heart. However, his master had already broken through to the spirit will level and reached the legendary realm, yet he still died there. It had been many years since he had made any progress, and that sword strike from a few days ago had injured his foundation. He was afraid that he would never have the chance to touch that level again, and he would never be able to see for himself what was there. He could only get some information about the depths of the 60,000 mountains from the spirit will expert beside Rinpoche. You mean Lin Shaola? Someone found him when he was a baby. Do you know what happened? Rinpoche's curiosity was piqued. Previously, when Qing Yun's sword said that she wasn't human, he guessed that Qing Yun's sword knew something. Picked it up? Are you trying to deceive this old man? Qing Yun's sword's eyes emitted a cold light as he asked loudly. After all, he was a spirit will expert. Rinpoche was shocked when he raised his aura. Gong Zheng, who was beside him, stepped forward and stared coldly at Qing Yun's sword. She did indeed pick it up. She picked it up outside the palace. I don't know much about it, but she herself doesn't know much about it. What do you know? Upon hearing what Rinpoche said, Qing Yun's sword's imposing manner immediately subsided and he no longer spoke. After Rinpoche repeatedly questioned her, she finally told him about her master, which made him click his tongue in wonder. This was the second time he had heard about the spirit wheel experts. The last one was the founding emperor, who had reached the longevity heaven realm. A cardinal heaven expert was equivalent to a spirit wheel expert, while a longevity heaven expert was at the same level as Qing Yun's sword's master. However, his combat power should be slightly higher. He was also missing, and he disappeared with a large number of people. This time, it was Qing Yun's sword's master again. Rinpoche made a mental note of this matter. In the future, he would find an opportunity to send someone to investigate. Rinpoche ordered his men to bring the rest of the people here and interrogate them again. More than 40 of them surrendered as he had expected. There were still a few stubborn ones who were dragged away and beheaded. Not long after, someone came in with their heads. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, "You don't have to show me. Find a place to bury them." In the afternoon, Rinpoche found the empress and ordered a spirit will expert from the Protectorate of the South to accompany Qing Yun's sword to Lingshan with 200 winged cavalry warriors and 200 ordinary soldiers. If they surrendered, they would kidnap them and take back all the valuables to replenish the national treasury. After all, the northeast and southeast were still at war. If they didn't surrender, they would massacre the Lingshan sect and take back all the valuables. As the number one sect in Tianjin Basin, they should have some assets. Subsequently, 200 winged cavalry warriors and 200 ordinary cavalrymen were sent to lead a few small sects in the same direction. They would go to each sect and plunder if they surrendered. If they didn't surrender, they would be slaughtered. With 200 earth wheel experts, as long as they didn't encounter a spirit wheel expert who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon, they could do whatever they wanted in Tianjin Basin. After arranging for these two groups of people to set off, Rinpoche made some arrangements. After one day, he personally led 200 winged cavalry warriors and Lin Shaola to the Golden Ring residence. While Rinpoche was still on the road, Qing Yun's sword and the others arrived at the foot of Lingshan. The Lingshan sect was named after this place. The mountain gate was at the foot of the mountain. It was a tall stone gate with the words Lingshan written on it. Anyone who saw it for the first time would immediately be attracted by the words. It was said that these two words contained a set of swordplay. There was once an expert who came to challenge the Lingshan sect and saw these words in front of the mountain gate. After standing there for 3 days, he comprehended the set of swordplay, bowed, and left. Later, when the Lingshan sect encountered a formidable enemy, he even made a move to repel the enemy. That person's descendants had always lived in Tianjin Basin. There were still descendants, but they had already declined. This was recorded in the ancient books of the Lingshan sect. From the mountain gate all the way to the waist of the mountain, there were steps made of white stones. The steps were as smooth as jade and hadn't been damaged for hundreds of years. There were hundreds of thousands of steps winding up the mountain like a white snake. In this world, it was unknown how much manpower and material resources were needed to build such a mountain path. What was even more precious were these stones, and each piece was very expensive. The winged cavalry warriors' eyes lit up when they saw these stone steps. Principal Ren had said to take away the valuable things, and these stone steps looked good. The winged cavalry warriors had interacted with him a lot and knew his position in the Empress's heart. As such, they were very attentive to his words. "Wait for me here. I'll go up and persuade them," Qing Yun's sword said to the other spirit wheel expert. The spirit wheel expert leading the team was called Qing Ping. He was the captain of Zhichong in the Protectorate of the South and was a rank 4 official. He was the number 1 person below Shi Wanya and the deputy protector general. 2 hours, Qing Ping said in a deep voice. After 2 hours, regardless of whether you succeed or not, I will lead my men and bathe this Lingshan in blood. Qing Yun's sword cupped his hands and disappeared in front of everyone. He appeared on the steps and disappeared in a flash. Less than an hour after Qing Yun's sword went up, Qing Ping sensed 2 auras colliding on the mountain. It was a battle between spirit wheel experts. "Sir, do you want to go up?" the captain of the winged cavalry asked. "Wait," Qing Ping said in a deep voice. The battle stopped after the time it took for an incense stick to burn. After another hour, Qing Yun's sword came down from the mountain. Qing Yun's sword's face was pale, and his clothes were wet. It looked like he had been spat on. "General, they have surrendered." Following his words, more than 300 people came down from the mountain. They were all dressed in green, and there were both men and women. There were even infants in swaddling clothes. The leader was an old man who set his sights on Qing Ping as soon as he came down. He had fought with Qing Ping before, but it was only a draw when the 3 of them worked together. "We have surrendered," the old man said bitterly. "There are quite a lot of people. Tie them up," Qing Ping said in a deep voice. The hundreds of people immediately became restless. According to Her Majesty's orders, if anyone resists, the entire Lingshan will be exterminated without mercy. Qing Ping said murderously. "Silence," the old man turned around and shouted. Chapter 479. What are you smelling? Rinpoche couldn't help but ask when he saw Lin Qiaola sniffing his body. In fact, for the past 2 days, he had noticed that Lin Qiaola especially liked to sleep next to him. Every day when she woke up, she would walk around him and sniff him. If it weren't for Lin Qiaola, Rinpoche would have suspected that his charm was off the charts. "Oh, it smells good and fragrant." Lin Qiaola was a little intoxicated. Rinpoche smelled himself suspiciously. The perfume had already been given to the Empress, and now there was only a very diluted stench on his body. However, those winged cavalry warriors had intentionally distanced themselves from him for the past 2 days. How could Lin Qiaola say that he smelled good? Could it be that Lin Qiaola liked the smell of stinky tofu? What a strange hobby. He didn't know if she liked smelly socks and feet that hadn't been washed for a month. If she did, he could satisfy her. Everyone rested for less than an hour before continuing their journey. After another half a day, they finally arrived at the Golden Ring residence and could see the mountain gate from afar. At this time, a group of people were busy packing up their things in the Golden Ring residence. They didn't even care about the small items that fell to the ground. It was a chaotic scene everywhere as if they were fleeing for their lives. Zhang Chongkong looked at everything in the residence with some reluctance on his face. However, he understood very well that they couldn't stay in the north. The army of the Protectorate of the South was heading south. It would only take a few days to reach here, and they wouldn't be able to defend themselves no matter what. Only by reaching the south, gathering many sects, recruiting more soldiers, and relying on the steep terrain would they barely be able to resist the winged cavalry. However, he didn't have much hope that they could resist the winged cavalry. In my opinion, why don't we go over Mount Wangduan, go to the Qin Nation, and then make a detour to the Yun Nation? Painting Fairy suggested. I can go, you can go, but they can't, Zhang Changkong said in a deep voice. Mount Wangduan, heartbroken. Even though they could cross the earthwheel level, they could only carry one more person. At most, a dozen of them could escape. What about the rest? Some of the people in the residence had grandfathers and fathers who were disciples of the Golden Ring residence and had served the residence for generations. How could he abandon them and escape alone? Father, are we really leaving? Zhang Kaixian walked over from the courtyard and asked reluctantly. She was still hugging her beloved vase. I'll be back. How could Zhang Changkong be willing to leave? How could he be willing to give up his foundation? However, the Golden Ring residents didn't have any power that could resist the Aboriginal army. Furthermore, there weren't any precipitous terrain. How could they defend it? Manor Lord, bad news. Manor Lord. Why are you in such a panic? Zhang Changkong frowned. The ancient race is here. We're not far from the mountain gate. So fast? Bring Sienna away. I'll bring people to face the enemy. Zhang Changkong was taken aback at first. To think that the ancient race had arrived faster than he had expected. He had only been back for 2 days, and the ancient race had already arrived. Now was not the time to hesitate. He instructed Painting Fairy and strode forward. Halfway through, he stopped and said, If I die, take Xian Air and leave. The further, the better. Go to the Yun Nation or Great Xia. Don't think about revenge. Father? Zhang Kaixian cried out in alarm. Painting Fairy revealed a mournful expression. However, she had wandered in the underworld before and wasn't wishy-washy. She pulled Zhang Kaixian and was about to leave the mountain. When the Golden Ring residence was first built, they had considered the possibility of foreign enemies invading. As such, there were arrow towers in the residence, which were also dark alleys for people to hide in. Even though he didn't know how useful they would be, Zhang Changkong still made arrangements for everyone and brought a few attendants to the mountain gate. On the horizon ahead, a group of cavalrymen was advancing. They weren't fast, but everyone's hearts tightened. Regardless of which sect it was, there was no one who wouldn't feel fear when faced with the approaching Aboriginal cavalry. They weren't afraid of that group of cavalrymen, but of what they represented. Manor Lord, it's the winged cavalry, someone said with a deathly pale face after looking around for a long time. Once this was said, everyone was terrified. Let the young disciples leave. Attendant Chu, you leave too, Zhang Changkong said. Since it was the winged cavalry that had arrived, those young disciples wouldn't be of much use. Even the people around them wouldn't be of any use. Since that was the case, it was better to let the young disciples leave and leave some seeds behind. As for Attendant Chu, even though his martial arts weren't the best, he had the most diverse knowledge and could pass down as many martial arts techniques as possible. As for the rest, Zhang Changkong turned around and looked at the people behind him with an apologetic gaze. Someone had to stay behind to buy time for the rest. We will advance and retreat together with the Manor Lord. An attendant shouted. After staying in the residence for decades, I'm old now. I can't move anymore and don't want to leave. Another attendant said with a smile. After keeping them for decades, we'll get rid of them one last time. Damn it. Another deacon with a pale face and scholarly appearance said in a coarse voice. This deacon was originally a bandit from a mountain. Later on, he robbed the Golden Ring residence and his entire stronghold was destroyed. It wasn't easy for him to escape with his life. In the end, he decided to climb back up from where he had fallen and actually entered the Golden Ring residence. He stayed there for decades and even became an attendant. Zhang Changkong looked at everyone with tears in his eyes. He pursed his lips and said, I'm not alone in this life. I'm not alone. Everyone laughed. Even the strong enemies in the distance weren't that scary anymore. It was just death. He wasn't alone in this life, and he would have company on the road to the underworld. As the cavalry approached, Zhang Changkong could already see the people in front and Rinpochian in the crowd. I've been deceived by him. Zhang Changkong was somewhat indignant. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't have reached such a state and Chief Elder wouldn't have died in battle. It was that woman beside him who bit Chief Elder to death. Every time he thought of this, his heart was filled with regret. He didn't expect that he would be the one to annihilate the Golden Ring residents. When he thought of how he almost gave his daughter to Renbaqian, he simply wanted to laugh. His laughter was filled with sorrow and indignation. When they were about 100 meters away from the mountain gate, Renbaqian asked the troops to stop. At this moment, there were more than 30 people standing at the mountain gate. Other than the 7 or 8 earthwheel experts at the front, the rest were all manwheel experts. With such strength, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot in front of the winged cavalry. Renbaqian clamped the fork-horned cow's abdomen, and it slowly moved forward and stopped in front of the troops. "You actually have the cheek to stand here. I was really blind back then." Zhang Changkong scolded. "I purposely came here to give you a way out. Otherwise, the Golden Ring residents wouldn't need me to summon you." Renbaqian shook his head. "Surrender. All of you just want to go out? In fact, this is what I want to do. It's such a waste to leave so many people in Tianjin Basin unused. This time, I came here with the intention of letting the people of Tianjin Basin gradually go out and live together with the Aboriginals. Isn't that what all of you want to see? Stop with your flowery words. I won't surrender even if I have to die. If you have the ability, come and take my head yourself." A white-faced deacon scolded angrily. Renbaqian had some impression of this person as he was one of the deacons in the inner sanctum. Although he looked like a gigolo, he was actually very boorish. However, he still looked like a gigolo at the age of 50 or 60, which really made people envious. "A monk doesn't lie. I'm the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy and a secondary class, rank 4 official. Why would I lie to you ruffians? Moreover, if I wanted to, I could flatten the Golden Ring residents in minutes. Under such circumstances, why would I waste my breath to deceive all of you? This is the only way out for all of you. I presume that you have already arranged for people to leave through the mountains?" Renbaqian asked faintly. Since the other party was already waiting at the entrance, they definitely wouldn't leave everyone in the residence to die. "Send 100 people to the mountains to capture everyone," Renbaqian said to the people behind him. "Keep them alive. If they resist, break their limbs, but keep them alive. You traitor, you will die a horrible death." Someone in the crowd cursed angrily. The people in the residence had just left not long ago, so how could they escape the pursuit of 100 earthwheel experts? Renbaqian tilted his head and realized that he had become the big devil that everyone hated. Speaking of which, he came to the community to send warmth. These people were really kind-hearted, yet they were f***ed by dogs. Are you surrendering? If you surrender, as long as you don't go against the imperial court in the future and know your place, I will naturally guarantee your safety. If you want to leave Tianjin Basin, you just need to apply for a temporary identification card and a temporary residence permit. You can even go to Lan City and live under the emperor's rule. If you don't surrender, I will be kind enough to let your whole family stay together. Even if he runs away to Great Xia, I will find him and send him to reunite with all of you. What's that saying again? The most important thing for a family is to stay together. If 1 or 2 of you are missing, it will be too cruel. Dear benefactors, the sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent, and the shore is at hand. Now, are you going to surrender or not? Or will you only regret it when everyone's heads are placed here? Renbaqian had been speaking lightly, but when he reached the last 2 sentences, his voice became stern and his eyebrows raised. Are you going to surrender? Are you going to surrender? Are you going to surrender? The 100 winged cavalry warriors behind him shouted at the same time, and their voices shook the sky. Under the protection of 100 winged cavalry warriors, Renbaqian was like a devil king. Everyone at the mountain gate was prepared to die and felt that they were fearless. However, under this pressure, they were moved and subconsciously took a step back. Chapter 480. We surrendered. Zhang Changkong's face was ashen when he said this. The people behind Zhang Changkong moved their lips, but they didn't say anything in the end. Renbaqian's words disintegrated their fighting spirit in several ways. Firstly, the Aboriginals didn't have a tradition of surrendering, so they could only fight to the death. Secondly, the goal of most of them was to leave Tianjin Basin or simply follow the prefecture chief. Rinpoche's words included the former, which reduced their resistance. As for the latter, even the chief had surrendered. Did they really have to court death? Thirdly, it didn't matter if most of them died, but it would be too cruel if their family members were killed as well. Either all of them lived or all of them died. There wasn't a middle option, which made them cower again. That's right. A wise man submits to circumstances. Rinpoche nodded. That little girl wouldn't have to wander the world alone and end up being kidnapped and sold to a brothel. If his only disciple who was skilled in Eru ended up playing the Eru in a brothel, how could he bear it? However, at this moment, someone walked out from the crowd. Everyone was shocked when they saw his actions. Deacon Peng? What are you going to do? So be it if you surrender. I don't blame you and won't implicate you. Great Elder has been very kind to me. I'm not capable enough to avenge him, and I don't have the face to live on. I might as well go down to look for Great Elder and serve him by his side. A person stood 10 meters away from the crowd and looked straight at Rinpoche. It was the pale-faced deacon from before. When he said this, everyone immediately revealed a look of shame on their faces. Even Zhang Changkong's face revealed a moved expression. A few people behind him moved slightly to the side, and then a person walked out from the crowd and stood beside Deacon Peng, saying, "I'm all alone, and I've lived long enough. I'll accompany you on your journey. Great Elder has been good to me. I'll go down to look for him too." "Me too." 5 or 6 people walked to Deacon Peng's side in succession. There was even an inner deacon among them. This made more people waver. Even Zhang Changkong looked like he was struggling. Rinpoche somewhat admired these people. They risked their lives and shed their blood because of their passion. However, this was also their weakness. They were too easily hot-blooded. Especially Zhang Changkong. As the leader of a sect, he was actually influenced by others and did not care about his wife and children. He was simply a good-for-nothing. Originally, he had a good impression of Zhang Changkong. After all, he was the one who sent his daughter over. However, after this incident, she looked down on him a lot. Rinpoche sat on the back of the fork-horned cow and said coldly, "This is a matter of life and death, yet you're being influenced by others. Sometimes you surrender, and sometimes you don't. You don't have any opinion of your own. To put it nicely, you people value loyalty and friendship. To put it bluntly, they're just a bunch of brainless boors." As soon as Rinpoche said this, other than those who had stepped forward, everyone else lowered their heads. Zhang Changkong also sighed and glanced at Deacon Peng and the rest with a guilty gaze. Deacon Peng said in a carefree manner, "Mannerhead, you don't have to be like this. This is my own choice. Brothers, we'll take our leave first. When we meet again in the future, we'll drink and chat merrily." Rinpoche had a look of admiration in his eyes. This attendant Peng was pretty good. He had a firm grasp of his own heart and was clear about things. What a pity. It wasn't only him. Many of the winged cavalry warriors behind her also had a look of admiration in their eyes. After all, they were men who had fought bloody battles on the battlefield and liked to talk about life and death the most. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, "Send them on their way." Serenogo. One of the winged cavalry warriors cupped his hands at Rinpoche, leaped forward, drew his sword in midair, and slashed at Deacon Peng below. A few rays of sword light flashed, and heads flew into the sky one by one. "Dig a hole and bury them. Tie up the rest and inform the people from before that those at the foot of the mountain have surrendered. Be more lenient," Rinpoche instructed. After Zhang Changkong and the rest had their hands tied up, Rinpoche rode his mount toward the Golden Ring residence. Before him, 10 people had entered the residence to see if there were any ambushes or assassins. When Rinpoche entered the residence, he saw that the ground was in a mess. There were also some maids who didn't manage to escape in time and were kneeling and trembling at the side. He still remembered the location of the main hall of the Golden Ring residence. Without anyone leading the way, he arrived at the main hall by himself. He looked up and saw that the 17 beads were no longer there. "Sir, what do we do next?" A winged cavalry captain came in and asked, "See what else is there? Pack up all the valuable things. Ask those people outside. They know best where the valuable things are. Also, ask them to hand over the 17 beads that were originally here." Renbachian muttered to himself for a while and said, "Ask them if they have a library or something like that. Take out all the secret manuals in the residence. They can make a copy of it as an inheritance and take the original copy with them." He had just thought of the secret manuals. After all, he had plagiarized so many sects in Tianjin Basin, especially these big sects, and there might be some good things. Since he couldn't use them, it would be good to take them back to enrich Qingxin Palace Hall. He could also bring them back to Earth and hand them over to the nation. The more secret manuals there were, the better the effect of using a supercomputer to deduce martial arts. After all, a supercomputer wasn't an immortal, and it required sufficient information to make better deductions. Just like AlphaDog, it wouldn't be able to reach that level without tens of thousands of chess games recorded in the database. At night, those who wanted to escape from the mountains were all caught and brought back. Zhang Changkong had been locked in a room. When he saw Painting Fairy and Zhang Kaixian being tied up and thrown in, Zhang Caixin's face was red and swollen, and both of her arms were broken. He immediately smiled bitterly. When Painting Fairy saw Zhang Changkong in the room, the panic in her eyes quickly subsided. She smiled and asked, "Do I look ugly now?" "You have always been so beautiful." Zhang Changkong shook his head. "When I came up the mountain, I wondered if I had forgotten something. Later on, I remembered that I said that if you died, I would accompany you. However, I was worried about Xian, and afraid that she wouldn't be able to persevere. It's fine now. I don't have to think so much. We are a family now, so it doesn't matter if I die," Painting Fairy said with affection in her eyes. "I'm sorry," Zhang Changkong said sadly. "There's nothing to be sorry about. Life and death are all fated." Painting Fairy smiled. "It has been hard on Xian. It's not hard on me. I'm very happy being with my parents." Zhang Changkong saw that his wife and daughter were in such a state and felt even more dejected. He then pulled himself together and said, "However, it seems that I won't die for now." After that, he repeated what Renbachian had said. "Because of this, I surrendered." Painting Fairy smiled. "I knew that my husband wasn't someone who was afraid of death. Seeing that you are fine, I knew that there must be a reason." Zhang Changkong felt even more guilty after hearing this. Renbachian spent the whole night checking the treasures and secret manuals that he had plundered. There were many valuable things. After all, they were accumulated by the Golden Ring residents over many years. Just the value of the 17 pearls alone was immeasurable. As for the secret manuals, he simply flipped through them and put them down. He couldn't tell if they were good or bad. He then asked someone to pass the secret manuals and paper to Zhang Changkong so that he could find someone to copy them and leave them as the inheritance of the Golden Ring residents. This action also made the people of the Golden Ring residents feel completely at ease. They knew that Renbachian really didn't intend to kill them. The next day, Renbachian asked Zhang Changkong to arrange for people to contact the disciples of the residents in the surrounding cities to surrender. After all, the Golden Ring residents had been entrenched here for many years. Apart from the people in the residence, there were also many disciples who were officials in the surrounding cities. Their relationships were complicated, and they had a huge network of connections. When the second batch of 5,000 soldiers from the Protectorate of the South entered Tianjin Basin, 3 of the 5 cities immediately opened their gates and surrendered. Chapter 481. Early in the morning, more than 100 disciples of the Golden Ring residents stood together with their hands tied with ropes. In fact, these ropes weren't used to imprison them, but rather to remind them of their identities. In front of 200 winged cavalry warriors, 100 people would at most be turned into a pile of blood after a single charge. Previously, when Renbachian asked them to copy a secret manual for the inheritance of the Golden Ring residents, they were relieved and naturally wouldn't do anything too unwise. Zhang Kaixian was standing among this group of people. A few days ago, She was still the daughter of the chief of the Golden Ring residence and was doted on by everyone. Now she had become a prisoner. This sudden change in identity, coupled with the experience of escaping and being captured, made her grow up a lot overnight. Occasionally, she turned to look at the disciples in the residence and saw that most of them looked dejected. No one spoke. More than 100 people stood there and barely made a sound. Jean Caissien heard footsteps and saw Rinpochen at the entrance of the courtyard. The last time she saw him, he was still an envoy from the Yun nation. He knew how to roast delicious food and teach her the eru. She had never been in contact with a man day and night, and she even started to like him. However, this time around he was an official of Dayo and the husband of the Empress, Qi Zixiao. It was because of him that her family had fallen into such a plight. It was also because of him that she could reunite with her parents and didn't have to worry about losing her life. This gave her an indescribable feeling. This feeling was very complicated, and she couldn't describe it. She didn't know whether it was hatred or not. She didn't even know how to hate someone and what it was like to hate someone. Did he see me? Jean Caissien seemed to see Rinpochien's gaze lingering on her face for a moment. Her heart skipped a beat, and she lowered her head slightly. Why did he come to the Golden Ring residence? The closest sect to Wu City is the Lingshan sect, which is also the biggest sect in Tianjin Basin. Not only is the Golden Ring residence ranked last among the 8 big sects, but it's also very far away. Why did he come here? Jean Caissien lowered her head and began to let her imagination run wild. Rinpochen swept his gaze across the crowd and indeed saw her, but he didn't stop at all. To him, this little girl was somewhat interesting and pitiful. Furthermore, she was the only successor of his eru. At least she had a pair of sharp ears and could tell that his eru sounded nice. A bosom friend, a high mountain and flowing water. Yu Boya and Zhong Ziqi. Just because of this, he had to personally make a trip to the Golden Ring residence, lest others came over and killed everyone in the Golden Ring residence. Therefore, it wasn't wrong to say that he was here for her. It was just that there was no romantic love between them. Now that he knew that she wasn't dead, he could put his worries to rest. In the future, the Eru world will depend on you to make it flourish. We'll head back first. Bring them back to Wu City. The reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South should be arriving soon. Keep an eye out for them. If there are cities that rebel and the Protectorate of the South's attack isn't going well, you can send people to help them according to the situation, Rinpochen said as he walked. 200 people didn't seem like much. However, 200 Earthwheel level winged cavalry warriors could do a lot of things. 50 people were enough to escort them to Wu City. In Tianjin Basin, 50 people could even break through a small city. Understood. The winged cavalry captain cupped his fists and replied. As for the food and drinks along the way, let Zhang Changkong arrange it himself. I'm sure he'll arrange for good men to bring you food along the way. In addition, since they've surrendered, I might need them in the future. As long as they don't rebel, don't bother with them. If they really want to rebel, kill one person for each rebellion. If more than half of them rebel, kill all of them and report to me. However, I don't think this will happen. Rinpochen turned his head and looked at the people in the courtyard. Go back and make the arrangements. Rinpochen waved his hand after he finished speaking, and the captain immediately withdrew. Rinpochen first brought some people back to Wu City as there were still many things that needed to be dealt with. The 50 winged cavalry warriors escorted these people and plundered their belongings and set off at the same time. However, their speed was much slower, so they had to split into 2 groups. At present, there were only 100 winged cavalry warriors in the residence. The rest had been sent out 2 days ago to wipe out the surrounding small sects like the Nine-Blade sect. A week later, Rinpochen returned to Wu City again. From afar, he could see the original guards of Wu City, which surprised him a little. He didn't know if something had happened. When he arrived at the city gate, he found that the original guards of Wu City were inspecting the city. A few winged cavalry warriors were standing on top of the city wall with their arms crossed. When they saw that Rinpochen had returned, they hurriedly went back to report. After half a month, Wu City had more or less regained some liveliness. At the very least, some pedestrians could be seen walking in the city. However, they lowered their heads and walked very quickly, as if they were afraid of attracting attention. As for the shops in the city, they were open. Occasionally, 1 or 2 people would go in to buy something and then leave in a hurry. After returning to the residence, Renbachian first went to see the empress. Seeing that she was talking to Shiwanya, Renbachian knocked on the door sill, strode in, and said, "Your Majesty, I'm back." The empress glanced at him and said to Shiwanya, "You may leave first." After Shiwanya left, Renbachian smiled and said, "Your Majesty, I missed you so much." The empress picked up a fruit and asked faintly, "How did it go?" "Everything went smoothly. There's no more sugar." "I got it. I will go back tonight." "Your Majesty, do you want to take a stroll?" After saying this, Renbachian moved closer to the empress and sniffed. The empress pressed her palm on his nose. "What are you doing? The smell has finally dissipated." Renbachian laughed. At this time, the empress's body had regained its original body fragrance. It would have been better if Renbachian hadn't mentioned this, but the empress's face immediately turned black. If it wasn't for him, how could that have happened? Every time she thought about it, she wanted to bury Renbachian in the wall, leaving only his head outside so that she could casually hit him to vent her anger. Over the past 2 days, many people have been sent to the city. You decide how to deal with them. Kill those who deserve to be killed, the empress said in a cold tone. The empress spoke in a cold tone. She didn't really care about the life and death of those people. However, it seemed like Renbachian had some plans for them. "I will go and deal with it now. I still have some hot pot seasonings. Why don't we have hot pot tonight?" "All right." Renbachian bade farewell to the empress and went out to inquire about the recent events. There were a few things that had happened. The 3 major factions had revolted, and many sects had joined in. This increased the number of Earthwheel experts in the 3 major factions, and there were even some Spirit Wheel experts in charge. Fortunately, Renbachian had arranged for people to persuade the Lingshan sect and some other sects to surrender. The area around these sects was basically calm and peaceful. Currently, there were only a few cities in the north rebelling, and it wasn't a big deal. On the contrary, the south of Wu City was almost united. Some of the sects in the north were also clear that the north wasn't a big deal, and staying in the north would only lead to death. After returning from Wu City, they brought their entire sects to the south and strengthened the power of the 3 major factions. When Renbachian heard this news, he stood there for a while before asking someone to call Qingyun Sword over. "Do you know about the 3 major factions revolting?" Qingyun Sword nodded silently. "Arrange for people to contact those sections. If an individual participates, 9 familial exterminations will be carried out. If more than 1/3 of the sects participate, the entire sect will be slaughtered. Give them 1 month to report to Wu City. Those who don't arrive within the time limit will be killed. If they are late by 1 day, they will die." This 1/3 number is divided into man-wheel and earth-wheel experts. As long as there is 1/3 of the man-wheel experts, the entire sect will be annihilated. Even if there are only 3 earth-wheel experts in the sect, if one of them participates in the rebellion, regardless of whether the other man-wheel experts or earth-wheel experts are involved, the entire sect will be turned into ashes. If they want to save their lives, kill the rebels and report to Wu City. I will ensure their safety. After hearing Renbachian's words, Qingyun Sword immediately raised his head and said, "This is too overbearing. After all, many sects have people in military positions. You are forcing them to their deaths. That's their business. Otherwise, how would I know if they aren't stepping on 2 fence-sitters? Moreover, I don't want to spend too much effort on them. What I want is the people of Tianjing Basin. As for these practitioners, I have already given them a way to live. Whether they can grasp it or not is their own business. If they want to live, I think it won't be difficult to kill them unintentionally, right? Well, on account of the fact that some of their sects have joined the rebellion, some of them may not be willing to wallow in the mire with the others, but they are willing to turn over a new leaf in this filthy land. I will also give such people a chance. You just need to bring the head of a fellow disciple of the same level. Remember, it must be a fellow disciple. You can't just casually kill someone. This is called proof of allegiance. After Renbachyen finished speaking, Qingyun's sword stared at him fiercely and was speechless. His face was full of pain. Vicious, too vicious. Chapter 482. At night, Renbachyen was soaking in the bathtub. Surrounded by warm water, he moaned comfortably. It took him more than half a month to travel to and from the Golden Ring residence, and his body felt like it was falling apart. He couldn't wait to take a bath and relax after returning to Earth. As a northerner, he loved to take a bath. Taking a bath for a while could eliminate most of his fatigue. He turned on the television while taking a bath. The first thing that appeared was the news. First was the new air traffic control regulations. Recently, flying motorcycles were becoming more and more common on television. Some of the wealthier people in the country bought them from overseas. This time, the country reacted quickly and immediately introduced new air traffic control regulations. Flying equipment like flying motorcycles had to be approved by the relevant departments before they could be used. However, ordinary people knew that it was impossible to obtain such approval. The next piece of news was related to him. It was about the golden medicine. This was the business of the two medical projects that he and the Qin family were collaborating on. To be more precise, it was an entire pharmaceutical company that controlled the pharmaceutical factories under its banner. The laboratory was completely independent of this pharmaceutical company. Renbachyen watched for a while and realized that it was about the new leukemia drug. In fact, the new drug was still in clinical trials and hadn't been put into production yet. However, it seemed to be effective as it was directly on the news. Due to Renbachyen's special status, the cooperation with the Qin family was considered smooth sailing. Along the way, there were people protecting and giving them the green light. Everything went smoothly. After watching the news, Renbachyen switched off the television, changed his clothes, and went downstairs. The Empress was still sitting there eating ice cream and watching a television series. Renbachyen felt as if he had seen this scene hundreds or thousands of times. Almost every time he was on Earth, he would see the Empress in this posture. Renbachyen scooted over to the Empress's side and sat down. He conveniently picked up the ice cream that the Empress had placed on the table and was about to put it into his mouth. A gust of wind blew past, and Renbachyen looked at the Empress with his empty hands. In her left hand was a chocolate bar and in her right was a snowman. Sure enough, it wasn't easy to snatch food from the Empress's mouth. Renbachyen leaned back. "There's someone outside," the Empress said after finishing the chocolate and throwing the ice cream stick into the trash can. "Who?" "I don't know." After the Empress finished speaking, the doorbell rang. Renbachyen shuffled his slippers and opened the door. He saw a dirty little baldy in a gray monk's robe standing in front of the door and looking up at him. He was about 8 or 9 years old and looked rather likable with red lips and white teeth. However, what's with the tears in his eyes? "Arhat, I've finally found you." The little monk pouted and looked like he was about to cry. "I mistook you for someone else." Boom. Renbachyen immediately closed the door. "Ridiculous." Renbachyen mumbled and was about to leave when the doorbell rang again. "You got the wrong person." Renbachyen opened the door and said seriously. "Master asked me to look for you," the little monk said pitifully. "You have mistaken me for someone else. I'm not Arhat and I don't know your master." If it were someone else, he would have beaten him up. He really couldn't bear to hurt a 7 or 8-year-old little monk. After realizing this, Renbachyen suddenly realized why he couldn't defeat Tonglan. "Too small, I can't do it." Renbachyen sighed. He was still too soft-hearted and should ask the Empress to change his opponent when he returned. "My master is the abbot of the Jingxin Temple in the East Sea, Su Wen. He said that he had met you once." The little monk said quickly. He picked up a yellow bundle from the ground and opened it, revealing 4 peaches inside. As soon as he opened it, a fragrant and sweet smell wafted out and filled the entire door. The smell even drifted into the room. Renbachyen stared blankly for a moment and recalled the delicate and pretty monk that he had met before. He had indeed met him once. However, was this little monk really looking for him? How did he find him? Why was he looking for him? "These are spiritual peaches from the temple. Master asked me to bring 4 for you, Arhat," the little monk said while wiping his saliva. The smell was really tempting. Not to mention him, even Rinpoche couldn't help but reach out. The smell of the peaches was really tempting. This was the first time Rinpoche had seen a peach that could emit such a sweet smell. He couldn't eat it, but he could smell it just by holding it there. Furthermore, it made him salivate. What a fragrant smell. The Empress's voice sounded behind Rinpoche. Xing Ruo greets Lady Benefactor. Master asked me to bring these over. The little monk raised the yellow bundle in his hand. A jade-like hand passed by Rinpoche and 2 peaches went missing. Rinpoche was speechless. Since the Empress had already taken the peaches from Rinpoche, there was no way she wouldn't allow Rinpoche to enter the house. Rinpoche had already taken the peaches from Rinpoche. However, this monk Su Wen was really weird. Could it be that these 4 peaches were part of his plan? Rinpoche thought what he said previously was a coincidence. This time, it couldn't be a coincidence that this little monk found him, right? The image of that gigolo in his mind immediately became unfathomable. Come in. Rinpoche stepped aside. Yes. The little monk put his palms together and entered the room. Sit. Rinpoche brought the little monk into the room and pointed to the sofa opposite him. Why did your master ask you to look for me? Rinpoche asked. As Rinpoche spoke, a crunching sound came from the side. In the blink of an eye, a peach entered the Empress's stomach. Master said that my opportunity lies with Arhat. The little monk tried his best not to look at the Empress eating the peach while drooling. He put his palms together and said to Rinpoche, What opportunity? The opportunity to attain enlightenment. Who am I? How did you know that Su Wen asked you to look for me? Why did he call me Arhat? You are Bodhisattva and Arhat. Because Arhat walks the path of Bodhisattva, you are naturally Arhat, Xing Ruo said. What's the path of Bodhisattva? Rinpoche frowned. There is the great wish of salvation, self-cultivation, and salvation for all sentient beings. This is the path of Bodhisattva. The little monk put his palms together and said, Arhat walks the path of Bodhisattva, which is a good deed. It is the goal of all cultivators. Rinpoche sat there motionlessly and frowned. Was this Su Wen really that godly? Rinpoche had just thought of spreading Buddhism to Tianjin Basin so that the people there would believe in Buddhism and be more honest. However, Su Wen gave him the title of an Arhat and even sent him a monk. The great wish of salvation? Rinpoche wanted to spread the religion of science and technology in the other world. He wanted to combine science with martial arts, and his original intention wasn't to spread Buddhism. Salvation for all sentient beings. Rinpoche wanted to spread technology to that world, increase productivity, and improve people's lives. Was this considered salvation for all sentient beings? Or was this salvation for all sentient beings referring to the teachings of Buddhism? No matter what, this was too coincidental. It was so coincidental that it scared Rinpoche. Could it be that what he said previously really meant something? Did he know what he wanted to do this time? Was there really such a person in this world? How was this possible? What did your master say when you came? Rinpoche asked. Master said that I'm already a big boy and should snatch men from women and women from men. The little monk said innocently. Rinpoche stared at Xing Ruo. Did Su Wen say this? That unfathomable pretty boy monk? Su Wen, you are quite mischievous. At first glance, he felt that these words were quite mischievous. However, after thinking about it carefully, these words had a deeper meaning. This fruit. The Empress had been silent since she ate a peach and only spoke now. Is there a problem? Rinpoche stood up and asked. It's quite delicious. Chapter 483. This fruit is very beneficial for your cultivation, the Empress said to Rinpoche. It's also very effective for my injuries. Originally, I needed 10 days to recover. After eating this fruit, the damage to my body has been mostly healed. If not for my injuries, this fruit should be able to improve my cultivation a little. It's already considered a rare item. So effective? Rinpoche raised his eyebrows in astonishment. Although he knew from the taste that this fruit wasn't ordinary, He didn't expect it to be so effective. On Earth, it could be considered a treasure. Even in that world, it could be considered priceless. One had to know how powerful the Empress was. She could release a sound like a mountain torrent when her blood and chi flowed through her body. She was one of the most powerful people in the world. To be able to improve her cultivation a little would be extremely useful to Renbachien. He didn't expect Earth to have such a rare treasure. Furthermore, Su Wen actually sent 4 of them at once. Renbachien wouldn't believe that Su Wen didn't know anything. What made Renbachien uncertain was, what exactly did monk Su Wen know? Could it be that there were deities in the sky overlooking all living beings? Did his ability to travel back and forth have anything to do with them? Some thoughts flashed through his mind, but he smiled and said, "Since it's beneficial to your majesty, you can eat all of them." Although it's beneficial, it's still a little effective. However, it's very useful to you. It nourishes your whole body and replenishes your blood and chi. It's very effective, but it's gentle and won't cause you any harm. Instead, it will mend your body and benefit your future cultivation. These days, your cultivation progress is too slow. Eat it and you can catch up. After finishing her words, the Empress pushed the 3 peaches in front of him. Her ears were red as she leaned against the wall. It was unknown if she was thinking about the promise she made with Renbachien. After Renbachien attained the earth wheel level and stabilized, he could marry the Empress. Pushing these 3 peaches to him seemed to make him feel that she couldn't wait any longer. However, this peach was indeed very beneficial to Renbachien. Not only could it increase his strength, but it could also mend some of his injuries. This peach? Is it precious in the temple? Renbachien looked at the little monk and asked. He had some ideas about this peach. There is only 1 peach tree in the temple that produces the best peaches. There are only 8 peaches a year, and this is 4 of them, the little monk said. Renbachien raised his eyebrows. They only produced 8 peaches a year, and half of them were sent over at once. This was indeed a big gift. Master also said that for the next 5 years, he will give you 4 peaches every year. After 5 years, you won't need it anymore. When the Empress heard what the little monk said, she was a little astonished. 10 years and 20 pills, it was indeed not a small amount. After hearing this, Renbachien immediately stopped talking. First, he grabbed a peach and took a bite. A fragrant and sweet taste filled his mouth. The peach was fine and soft, and he swallowed it in 2 or 3 bites. Then, from his stomach, it turned into a warm current that spread to his limbs and bones. His whole body seemed to be in a warm state, and he felt as if he was floating. After swallowing the entire peach, his entire body heated up. He felt waves of heat surging through his body, causing him to be unable to move. The Empress gently patted his back. The warm current in Renbachien's body was immediately dispersed and integrated into his whole body. After Renbachien could move, he felt unbearably thirsty again. The temptation of the 2 remaining peaches on the table was even greater. He couldn't wait to grab one and eat it again, experiencing the same experience as before. However, after the Empress dispersed the warm current in his body, Renbachien's muscles flowed like waves. He felt his whole body was light as a feather, as if he was flying. When he came back to his senses, he was already in the visualization of wood. That metal chain was spinning on the tree trunk in front of him. After a quarter of an hour, Renbachien woke up from the visualization of wood. All the bones in his body made caca sounds. He felt his whole body relax, as if the shackles that had been entangled in his body for a long time had been unlocked. His whole body had become much stronger. He knew that this wasn't an illusion. He had just broken through the visualization of wood. Originally, he could only climb half of the gigantic tree in the visualization of wood. If he practiced normally, he would need at least 3 months. However, these 2 peaches saved him 3 months of hard work and allowed him to break through the first level. This effect could be said to be heaven-defying. At least in that world, there weren't many items that could have such an effect, let alone on Earth. This made Renbachien even more unable to see through Su Wen. In the past, when he worked with the nation, he was very clear that there weren't any supernatural abilities, immortals, or anything like that in this world. Otherwise, the nation wouldn't have treated him like that. He had also confirmed this point during his work with the Messier 87 department. However, Su Wen's various actions and these few peaches made him understand that there was indeed something wrong with this Su Wen. It seemed like he had to meet him. Renbaqian thought for a while and looked up at the little monk Xingruo. Since the other party had given him such a big gift, if it was just to send the little monk over to preach, there seemed to be no reason for him to reject it. The little monk wouldn't be able to return from that world and wouldn't be able to cause any impact. Furthermore, his age and identity meant that he didn't know much about things other than Buddhism, so he wouldn't be able to affect that world. However, to be on the safe side, Renbaqian still chatted with the little monk for a while before confirming his thoughts. The little monk grew up in the monastery and knew very little about the outside world. This was his first time coming down the mountain, and he was like a blank piece of paper. "If you follow me, you will never see your master again," Renbaqian said. "This little monk's fortuitous encounter is with you. Master said that this little monk will go wherever you want me to go. Aren't you afraid that I will kill or sell you?" The little monk obviously revealed a fearful expression, but he still clenched his teeth and said, "Regardless of whether I am killed or sold, it's still my fate." Upon seeing this, Renbaqian didn't say anything else. He lowered his head and looked at the peach. Even though it was still emitting a fragrant and sweet smell, it didn't have that impatient desire to eat it anymore. Immediately, he understood that this peach wasn't for him. Right now, he only needed to eat two. "Your Majesty, you should eat this one. I can feel that these two are already enough." Renbaqian ignored the little monk's expectant gaze and said to the Empress. Upon hearing this, the Empress didn't say anything else. She ate the peach in 2 or 3 bites. After a few minutes, a strong gust of air burst out from her body, sending Renbaqian, the little monk, the coffee table, and the sofa at the side flying. Only the Empress and the sofa that she was sitting on remained in their original positions. "Not bad, my injuries are finally healed." The Empress chuckled. Even though she wasn't afraid of pain, that kind of pain constantly provoked her nerves and made her very annoyed. At this moment, her injuries were completely healed. Her body had returned to its peak state, which made her feel very happy. In Wu City, a blind old man strolled along the city wall. The bamboo cane in his hand tapped lightly on the ground. This person's eyes were blindfolded, he wore a black robe, and his hair was neatly tied at the back of his head. This person gave off a strange feeling when he walked. If someone were to carefully observe this person, they would realize that the distance of each step was exactly the same. Every time he tapped with his bamboo cane, the direction in which he tapped was also exactly the same. His palms didn't tremble at all. As a result, it gave off a mechanical feeling. This person walked to the vicinity of the Empress's residence in Wu City. After hearing the berating from the front, he stopped in his tracks and carefully sensed the residence before muttering to himself, "She's actually not here?" Following which, he opened his mouth and said, "Where did Qi Zixiao go?" "Impudent! How dare you call Her Majesty by her name?" The 2 soldiers in front of the door immediately flew into a rage. They drew their steel swords and slashed at him. However, just as the 2 of them were about 10 meters away from this person, the blind man tapped twice with his bamboo cane in the air. The 2 of them stopped in their tracks and fell to the ground. Fresh blood flowed out from their chests. When such a thing happened outside, there was an immediate uproar in the residence. Tall and big figures jumped out of the residence and slashed at this blind man with gleaming swords. However, this blind man merely tapped the air with his bamboo cane, and the figures fell from the sky one after another. The cause of death was the same. There was a hole in their chests, and their hearts were shattered. In a short period of time, more than 10 people had fallen beside him. However, there were still winged cavalry warriors who heard the news and rushed over from all directions. Even though they saw the corpses on the ground, they weren't afraid at all and silently waved the steel swords in their hands. Shiwanya, who had rushed out after receiving the news, only saw dozens of winged cavalry warriors pouncing on this person. However, this person merely tapped the bamboo cane in his hand, and the winged cavalry warriors immediately lost their lives. Shiwanya immediately shouted angrily, "Where did this scoundrel come from?" How dare you? Where is Cheesy Xiao? The blind man said indifferently. His hands didn't stop as he reaped lives after lives. Chapter 484. Stand down. Shiwanya bellowed angrily and waved the long saber in his hand on the ground. It was as though there was an earth dragon swimming toward blind man wherever it passed. The flagstones on the ground would shatter and a ravine would appear in the soil. The blind man tapped the ground with his bamboo cane, causing the ground to explode. Countless mud and gravel flew in all directions. However, the blind man turned the bamboo cane in his hand and blocked the mud and gravel. Then he stabbed the cane diagonally at Shiwanya's chest. Shiwanya blocked with his saber in front of his chest. Clang! Shiwanya's entire body flew back 3 meters due to the impact. He landed on the ground and crushed the ground with his feet before stabilizing himself. He looked down at the saber in his hand and saw a dent about the thickness of a thumb on the blade. Bah? A godly spear? Shiwanya asked in a deep voice after spitting on the ground. Heh, the Protector General of the South is indeed skilled. The blind man laughed. Shiwanya grinned. It was indeed him. A spear is a godly spear, and a person is a vile person. These words were the best portrayal of him. Among the top 10 experts, there were 2 people who were the most disliked. One was Feng Sanlu, and the other was the godly spear, Tingyu. Both of them had extremely bad characters, but they were very strong. One was ranked 5th in the world, and the other was ranked 4th. Ordinary people couldn't do anything to them. Feng Sanlu was killed by the Empress, and no one expected Tingyu to appear here. What are you doing here? Shiwanya's face was cold and murderous. Heh, the Emperor of Great Xia sent someone to invite me to deal with Cheesy Xiao. I originally wanted to fight with her and injure her a little so that she wouldn't be able to do anything for some time. However, I heard some interesting news. Cheesy Xiao's injury hasn't healed yet, right? This made me change my mind. Although I'm blind, I've heard that Cheesy Xiao is beautiful. Therefore, I want to ask her for her hand in marriage. Both of us are a perfect match and we complement each other. With her strength, the only people who were worthy of her in this world were Miao Miao and a few others. The others aren't interested, but I'm very interested. Now, where is Cheesy Xiao? Ask her if she's willing. The betrothal gift is all of your lives. This kind of words that hit the weak and feared the strong, and when he saw that you were injured, he would ruthlessly bite you, yet it sounded so righteous coming out of his mouth. There was no need for him to say the first sentence and no one would know. However, he said it as if it was a matter of course, as if he was deliberately letting everyone know that he did not care about his status as the 4th most powerful expert in the world. Everyone's eyes widened in anger and they gritted their teeth. The person in front of him had a face full of wrinkles and a mouth full of yellow teeth. It was simply disgusting. A person like you is a disgrace to the 4th most powerful expert in the world. Shiwanya was so angry that his hair was about to stand up. Haha, what does being number 4 in the world have to do with who I am? Tingyu laughed out loud. Shiwanya was at a loss for words. The 4th most powerful expert in the world was his strength, not his character. In terms of luck, he would at least be in the top 3. His Majesty was 1st and he was 3rd. Winged cavalry, attack the enemy. Shiwanya roared. He was well aware of His Majesty's condition. No matter what, even if everyone died, he had to severely injure this person. When His Majesty recovers, this person will die. Get into formation in the courtyard. Gong Zheng, who was standing on the wall, shouted. Boom, boom. The walls and buildings in the courtyard collapsed one by one. After the dust had settled, a total of 800 burly men in leather armor could be seen standing in the ruins of the courtyard. The long sabers in their hands shone brightly, and their murderous aura soared to the sky. The murderous aura of everyone gathered together dispersed the clouds in the sky, causing everyone in Wu City to inexplicably feel a chill in their hearts and be filled with fear. Shiwanya, Zongshen, and Qingping formed a triangle and stood on the left, right, and back of Tingyu. Bloody battle. With a shout full of murderous aura, the 800 winged cavalry warriors clenched their teeth and pounced toward Tingyu. Even if the fourth most powerful expert in the world was in front of them, they wouldn't be able to take even half a step back. A hand stretched out from the ruins and pushed away the tiles and wood. Finally, a person with a head full of dirt and face emerged. Lin Xiaola looked around blankly. Where's the house? Where's the house? Where's the house? How did it get demolished when I was sleeping so soundly? Librarian Lin, this is a great enemy. Please help. Shi Wanya, who was fighting with Tingyu in the distance, saw the charging winged cavalry warriors fall one by one around Tingyu. His heart was bleeding nonstop, and his face was ashen. At this moment he saw Lin Xiaola in the courtyard and immediately shouted. On a roof in the distance, Qing Yun's sword looked at the battle situation in front of him with an unpredictable expression. Finally, he clenched his teeth, made a sword gesture, and a long sword flew out from his back. Shi Wanya was a little surprised to see Qing Yun's sword make a move, but his spirits were lifted. Not far away from Qing Yun's sword, an old man in linen clothes had a look of disdain on his face when he saw Qing Yun's sword make a move. He looked ahead with a gloating expression. It's better to provide timely assistance than to add flowers to embroidery. Old Devilswa, since you have already surrendered, can you still play a double game? Does your Lingshan sect still have a way out? Qing Yun's sword turned his head and shouted. Upon hearing this, the old man in linen clothes had a gloomy and uncertain expression on his face. After a moment, he let out a long sigh and flipped his palm upward. A water and fire rod gradually materialized in his hand. In the future, Tianjing Basin would either be ruled by the aboriginals or the three major powers. Just as Qing Yun's sword said, since the Lingshan sect had surrendered, there was no way out. If he made a move now, the future of the Lingshan sect would be better. Although he had no choice but to make a move, he held back 30% of his strength to harass the other party and protect himself. With the addition of these three spirit wheel experts, the pressure on Tingyu suddenly increased. Bang! The bamboo stick in Tingyu's hand exploded, and countless pieces of bamboo flew in all directions. As he twisted his body, a spear appeared in his hand. The spear was 7 feet long and covered with golden veined patterns. Little monk, do you want meat? Rinpochen, who was busy in the kitchen, poked his head out and asked teasingly. We only have meat at home. Xing Rua's eyes lit up when he heard about meat, and his saliva almost flowed out. You aren't pretentious at all. Rinpochen couldn't help but laugh. He thought that Xing Rua would refuse. I have to not starve to death to become a Buddha. Xing Rua looked calm. That makes sense. Rinpochen was amused by him. After being busy for a long time, he brought breakfast to the table and asked the two to eat. After taking 2 bites, Rinpochen heard the doorbell ring again. Who is it this time? Rinpochen was a little impatient. Usually, other than the housekeeper and Shenfeng, no one else would come. Last night, there was a little monk, and now, someone was ringing the doorbell again. Rinpochen impatiently pushed the door open, and his impatient face immediately froze. I'm dead? Why you here? He saw Rinpochen's parents standing in front of the door. They were both dressed casually, dragging a suitcase, wearing sun hats and sunglasses, and looked like they were traveling. I would have forgotten that I had a son like you if you didn't come to see me. Rinpochen's mother raised her eyebrows when she saw him. She reached out to pull his ear and scolded, Have you grown up? Have your wings hardened? Not only did you not bring your girlfriend back, but you are also not going home now. How long have you not been home? Why do we have to come and find you? Do you think you ran away from home? Rinpochen looked sullen. 1 day ago, he was still in charge of the lives and deaths of countless people and was high-spirited. 1 day later, he had become a grandson, and he couldn't even resist. His mother kept poking him in the head with her finger. Rinpochen felt that there was a saying from the ancients that was simply a true portrayal of himself. Chapter 485. But, are you blocking the door and not letting us in? Rinpochen's mother poked him with her finger for a long time until a large patch of his scalp fell off. Only then did she open her eyes wide and speak. Rinpochen really didn't want to let them in. Neither he nor the Empress was prepared to meet their parents. However, did he dare to say no in this situation? My girlfriend is inside. Be careful with your words and don't be too friendly. Don't be too reserved. Rinpoche whispered. The Empress's identity was special and she had a cold temperament. He was afraid that his parents would say something they shouldn't and feel uncomfortable. You are already cohabiting, yet you didn't bring her back to take a look. I'm your mother, and I'm here to take a look at my future daughter-in-law. What's there to be reserved about? Rinpoche's mother whispered while glaring at him. It's not what you think. Rinpoche waved his hand. Sharing a bed and pillow was cohabitation, and living in the same house was also cohabitation. He even lived with the Empress in the palace, which was considered cohabitation. However, this was completely different. Rinpoche reached out and dragged his father's suitcase over before bringing the two of them inside. Were you robbed? Rinpoche's parents were surprised when they came in. This house was indeed imposing. Although Rinpoche's parents were surprised, they didn't say much after being surprised for a long time. Instead, the scene in the living room surprised them more. The living room was in a mess. Two small sofas had fallen apart, the coffee table was broken, and there was a big hole in the wall. Just a small matter. Rinpoche tried to fool them, put the suitcase aside and asked, Have you had breakfast? I have eaten long ago. Take a seat first. Rinpoche quickly let them sit down. How did you gain so much weight? Rinpoche's father asked as he sat down. I'm strong. I'm strong. I'm strong. Rinpoche bulged his muscles. Was this considered fat? He was 1.75 meters tall and only weighed 100 kilograms. Was this considered fat? Where's my daughter-in-law? Rinpoche's mother looked around as soon as she sat down. I'll go and take a look. Rinpoche quickly ran to the dining room. The Empress was having breakfast with a pot of porridge and a pot of meat. He reckoned that his parents would be shocked if they saw the Empress's appetite. In any case, the little monk was scared out of his wits. From time to time, he raised his head and timidly looked at the Empress, afraid that she would eat him up. The Empress raised her head and glanced at Rinpoche. Then, she buried her head and continued to eat. My parents are here, Rinpoche whispered as he sat beside her. They don't know who you are, so please don't mind if they offend you. The Empress lowered her head and continued to eat the porridge. Seeing that the Empress's reaction was indifferent, Rinpoche felt a little relieved. However, he didn't dare to relax completely. Rinpoche didn't know if there was such a thing as meeting the parents in Dayo. However, looking at the Empress's reaction, it seemed like she hadn't. Even if there was, she wouldn't know. Do I have to see her? The Empress asked faintly after they had finished eating. According to her, it wasn't time for the wedding, so she would just return to her room. I think it's better for me to meet him. Rinpoche sighed. He had already been stopped by his parents, and it wouldn't be right if he didn't meet him now. Oh! You can continue eating, Rinpoche said to the little monk and walked out with the Empress. Breathtaking. This was the first feeling that Rinpoche's parents had when they saw the Empress. Both of them saw a lady in red walking out. They didn't have many adjectives to describe her, but they felt that this lady was prettier than those celebrities on television. She was tall, had fair skin, exquisite features, and fiery red lips. Her dashing eyebrows made her look even more heroic. In addition to that slightly cold and indifferent temperament, no matter where one saw such a person, they wouldn't be able to forget her at first glance. Furthermore, she had that kind of majesty. Although both of them hadn't seen any big shots before and didn't know what kind of aura was, they knew that she was definitely not an ordinary person. She gave off the feeling that she was someone who had walked out of a movie and existed in a fantasy. She didn't seem like a real person at all. Hello, I'm Rinpoche's father, mother. Both of them stood up at the same time and said. They finally understood why Rinpoche said not to restrain them. This daughter really made people subconsciously feel nervous when they saw her. They couldn't face her with the mentality of a normal parent meeting their daughter-in-law. Instead, it was as if they had met a big shot and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Although they had seen Rinpoche's selfies on their phones, seeing her in person was completely different. I'm so happy to meet both of you, Ren Baqian added. The Empress was interrupted by Ren Baqian's words. She turned her head to look at him, then turned to the two of them, nodded, and said, I'm so happy to meet both of you. This is my father, my mother, and this is Qi Xiao. Ren Baqian introduced them. Good name, very imposing, Ren Baqian's father immediately praised. Sit, don't just stand there and talk. Ren Baqian quickly called out. The Empress turned to look at him and asked with her eyes, Where should we sit? Except for the sofa in the middle of the living room, the rest of the furniture had been scrapped. I'll go and get 2 chairs. Ren Baqian called out and quickly ran to the dining room to get chairs. When he returned, he saw the 3 of them staring at each other. Sit. Ren Baqian put down the 2 chairs and gestured to his parents. Only then did they finally sit down. Thank you for taking care of Baqian. After sitting down, Mother Ren felt that she should speak, but didn't know what to say. Finally, she remembered that Ren Baqian said that she was his superior. He has also helped me a lot, the Empress said faintly. With Ren Baqian, her life had changed from black and white to colorful, and her daily life had become more colorful. What are you talking about taking care of me? Ren Baqian laughed it off. Why are you here all of a sudden? You didn't even give me a call. We couldn't reach you by phone, and you only called us once every 2 weeks. Your father and I have nothing to do, so we thought of looking at your new house and paying you a visit, Mother Ren said. Facing Ren Baqian, her tone immediately returned to normal. I'm busy, Ren Baqian replied. I don't know what you are busy with all day. Is that precious medicine the one you started? It seems to be in the limelight now, and you're still working on a new leukemia drug? Mother Ren asked. Before coming, she was afraid that Ren Baqian would be cheated again because of her beauty, so she wanted to take a closer look. In the end, when she saw the Empress, she felt that she wasn't a match for an ordinary person. She quickly brought up Ren Baqian's pharmaceutical factory to give him some confidence. This was the mentality of an ordinary person. Previously, they were afraid that the Empress wasn't worthy of their son, but now, they were afraid that their son would be despised by her. Although their son was the best in the eyes of their parents, they asked themselves honestly and felt that Ren Baqian was just an ordinary person in terms of appearance and other aspects. Although he had made some achievements in the past 2 years, he only had some money. Compared to those with real power, he was still far from it. Ren Baqian and the Empress accompanied them for a while. During this period, it was Ren Baqian talking to them, and the Empress rarely opened her mouth. During this period, the little monk Xing Ruo came out of the dining room, which surprised them. They didn't know why there was a little monk here. He was sent by his master to follow us to do some things, Ren Baqian casually explained. Although they were doubtful about what such a little monk could do, they didn't ask any more after thinking about Ren Baqian's identity as a civil servant. After a long time, Ren Baqian sent them upstairs. When they entered the room, they heaved a sigh of relief. Io, is it so tiring to see your daughter-in-law? Mama Ren closed the door and lay on the bed. If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have come. The daughter-in-law of an ordinary family is definitely different, Papa Ren said. This lady isn't from an ordinary family. But this lady is really beautiful, just like a character in a movie, Mama Ren said as she sat up. Papa Ren agreed deeply and said, she's just a little cold. In the past, I always heard people talking about the prestige of an official. Today, I finally experienced it for myself. She just stands there, and no one dares to speak carelessly. Outside, Ren Baqian and the Empress also heaved a sigh of relief. The Empress sat back on the sofa, hugged her knees, and said to Ren Baqian, who was rushing down the stairs, I want to eat an ice cream. Calm down. She felt very uncomfortable talking to Ren Baqian's parents. She couldn't expose her identity, speak in her usual way, restrain her temper, and couldn't chop the other party. The Empress felt that speaking to someone had never been so troublesome or tiring since she was young. Chapter 486. Ren Baqian's parents stayed in the villa for 3 days. At first, they weren't used to facing the Empress. After staying for 3 days, The two of them had become slightly more familiar with the Empress and could finally speak a few words with her. Renbaqian brought them around Shanghai for 2 days and even made a trip to Disneyland. His parents didn't play much, but the Empress and the little monk Xing Ruo had a good time. They realized that the Empress would only have more expressions when facing their son. She looked a little more human. At other times, she was cold. However, this made them feel a little better. If she was this cold after marrying someone, they would really marry an ancestor. You are a grown-up and know what to do. We won't meddle too much. But when are you bringing her home? We have met before, but we haven't met our relatives yet. We have to get to know them. Mother Ren said. She was calculating in her heart. If she brought this fairy-like lady back, her relatives and friends would definitely be shocked. At that time, she would definitely set up 30 tables for everyone to see. There will be a chance. Renbaqian half-heartedly sent them through the airport security and finally heaved a sigh of relief. From today onwards, he would be a king again. That day, he saw someone talking about a comic called Under One Man. He liked this name very much. He would take a look at this comic the next time he came back to see what kind of qualities were needed to be under one man. As a king, he had to work hard to enrich himself and improve himself. After sending the two of them off, Renbaqian brought the Empress and Xing Ruo to the shopping mall. A burly man, a beautiful woman, and a little monk. No matter how one looked at this family of 3, it looked weird. Passers-by cast sidelong glances at them. Of course, even without the little monk, just the Empress alone would also attract the attention of everyone. After buying a bunch of things, the 3 returned to the villa. Renbaqian packed the sweets, wine, hot pot base, and the Empress's clothes together and said to the little monk, "Hold on to me, I'm going to transform you into the magic monk, Xiao Yuan." "Does it hurt?" "Also, I'm Xing Ruo, not Xiao Yuan," the little monk said timidly. There was a ripple in the air, and the 3 of them and the 2 big bags disappeared from the room. Renbaqian was already used to this kind of transmigration. To him, it was as natural as drinking water and eating. It seemed like it should be like this. Sometimes, even he would forget that this was not an innate ability that he had, but something that had inexplicably appeared in his body. When he returned to the other world, he was immediately drenched by the torrential rain. The small monk looked at the pitch-black surroundings and the pouring rain. A second ago, he was still in the villa in Shanghai. His lips turned pale. Where is this? Renbaqian couldn't care less about the little monk. He was dumbfounded. When he left, he was clearly in the house, but where was the house? Where's the house? Where did the house go? The way I transmigrated was wrong? The Empress's facial expression was very ugly. It had only been a day and a night. When she left the house, it was still in ruins. How could she accept this? The Empress's aura surged, and a surge of energy rose from the ground. It was like a sudden clap of thunder that shook the entire Wu city. Immediately, silhouettes appeared in the ruins. "Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Your Majesty. We hope that Your Majesty will forgive us for being late." In an instant, a row of burly men knelt in front of the Empress. The small monk was so frightened that he took a few steps back and hid behind Renbaqian. The people who landed were all winged cavalry warriors. They were originally patrolling the surroundings of the ruins and immediately rushed over when they sensed the Empress's aura. "What's going on?" The Empress asked coldly. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Shi Wanya's figure appeared beside everyone. After sensing the Empress's aura, he asked in surprise, "Your Majesty, have you recovered?" According to his estimation, the Empress's body would need at least 10 days to recover. He didn't expect that in just a day and a night, the Empress had actually recovered when she returned from an unknown place. The Empress frowned. At this moment, Shi Wanya was much weaker than when she left. It seemed like he had fought with someone. Furthermore, there were at least 7 or 8 newly bandaged wounds on his body. What exactly happened? "Your Majesty, it's raining heavily now. Why don't you follow me to another place and explain in detail?" Shi Wanya said. "Lead the way." Everyone left the ruins under the heavy rain. Renbaqian and the Empress then realized that the area of the ruins wasn't small. It wasn't just the residence that they originally lived in. Even the surrounding residences were also full of broken bricks and tiles, broken walls and broken beams. After a short while, everyone arrived at another residence along the street. Hundreds of winged cavalry warriors stood upright in the rain. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Qing Yuan and Hong Luan hurriedly ran to the Empress's side with umbrellas and opened them for her. However, it didn't make a difference whether they fought or not. "I'm going back to change my clothes. Tell me later." The Empress had already calmed down and wasn't in a hurry. She went to the backyard with Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. Rinpoche also asked Shiwanya, found his own room, and changed into clean clothes. "Where is this?" The small monk had been in a daze ever since he came to this world. No matter how he looked at it, this wasn't Earth. There were also those tall and strong men with arms that could run horses. Every one of them made him want to hide far away. He had been spending his time in the monastery, practicing and reciting scriptures every day. He never had the concept of transmigrating to another world. "This will be the world you live in from now on," Rinpoche said as he put on his clothes. "Slowly get used to this place. Wait here, I'll go take a look." After speaking, Rinpoche left the small monk in the room and hurried out. He thought that the small monk should be able to calm down by the time he came back. When he came to the hall, Shiwanya, Qingping, Zongshen, and Gongzheng were also there. However, in addition to Shiwanya, Qingping also had serious injuries. The bandages wrapped around his body were red, and one of his ears was missing. As for Zongshen, even though he didn't look like he was injured, he was coughing up blood. How did they become like this? Rinpoche was shocked. One had to know that these three were Cardinal Heaven experts, and each of them could take on 3 ordinary spirit will experts. All 3 of them were seriously injured. What exactly was going to happen? What kind of person could injure them like this? "We'll talk about it when Her Majesty arrives," Shiwanya answered. He didn't care that Rinpoche and the Empress were missing for a day. After all, a subject couldn't possibly watch over Her Majesty all the time. Furthermore, Her Majesty managed to avoid being shot by the spear during the day, and her injuries were completely healed by the time she returned. This was a good thing. After waiting for a full 15 minutes, the Empress slowly walked in with a frosty face and a murderous look in her eyes. It seemed like she had heard something from Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. "Tell me in detail," the Empress said coldly after sitting down at the seat of honor. "Yes." Shiwanya immediately recounted everything that had happened in full detail. In fact, it was very simple. Spear Tengyu suddenly appeared in Wu City, said some disgusting things, and fought with everyone. However, Shiwanya explained such a simple matter for the time it took to drink a cup of tea. He told the Empress all the methods and characteristics that Tengyu had used. Finally, he said, "Now that Your Majesty has recovered, I can finally rest assured." "How many casualties were there?" the Empress asked. "We are guilty. We weren't a match for Spear Tengyu, and our injuries aren't light. However, if he comes again, we can still fight him." The winged cavalry suffered the most casualties, with 157 dead and 74 seriously injured. Among them, more than 30 can serve you after recuperating. Bang! Upon hearing this, the Empress immediately smashed the table beside her into pieces with a strong murderous look. Of the 200 people, even if only 30 could return to the team, there would still be 200 casualties. One had to know that the winged cavalry had a total of 1,500 men. After several battles, there were less than 1,000 of them left. After this battle, there were less than 800 of them left. It could be said that they had lost nearly half of their men. Even the Empress was heartbroken by such a loss. Rinpoche didn't show it on the surface, but he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although the winged cavalry suffered heavy losses, fortunately he and the Empress had returned to Earth to hide. It was fine as long as the Empress was fine. What followed was shock. The monk had sent 4 peaches at this time. Apart from 2 for himself, the other 2 were used to treat the Empress's injuries. Could he have predicted this? If he could really predict this, then it was simply terrifying. How could there be such a person on Earth? He wasn't a human anymore. He was simply a god. "Where's Tengyu?" I want to kill him and suppress him in the palace forever. The Empress spat out each word with a cold, murderous intent. Chapter 487. Where's Tengyu? The Empress asked. It seemed like she couldn't wait to kill him. I don't know. He's quite fast, and we were all injured, so he escaped. However, I think he'll come again in a few days. After all, he thought that Your Majesty's injuries would take more than 10 days to heal. As long as he hasn't given up, he'll definitely come again. Is Tengyu injured? Ren Baqin asked. He's worthy of being the fourth most powerful expert in the world. Even though we besieged him and killed so many winged cavalry warriors, his injuries were much lighter than ours. If he had good medicine on him, he would have recovered more than 60 to 70% by the time he appeared again. However, he would definitely die against the fully recovered Empress, Shi Wanya exclaimed. This Tengyu really deserved to die for speaking disrespectfully to the Empress and killing so many winged cavalry warriors. Even though his character was bad, his strength was solid. The Empress snorted. Even though she didn't want to admit it, from what everyone said, Tengyu was indeed a little stronger than her. The most important problem was that even though the Empress could achieve this level of combat power by burning her blood essence, she wasn't good at prolonged battles. If the battle with Tengyu dragged on for too long, the Empress would lose. She could kill Feng Sanlu in such a short period of time, but it was difficult to kill Tengyu. From this point of view, even though Tengyu was originally the fourth or fifth most powerful expert in the world, he was much better than Feng Sanlu. From the battle between the Empress at Mount Wu and Tengyu at Wu City, the Empress faced more than 10 spirit wheel experts. Even though she was injured, she still managed to kill a few of them. Even though Tengyu was able to escape unscathed, Shi Wanya and the rest were seriously injured. The main problem was that Tengyu was better at prolonged battles than her. The Empress knew her weakness, so she sometimes risked getting injured to kill her opponent. Another point was that after each battle, the Empress would only have 30% of her combat power left and would need at least a month to recover. This was also her biggest weakness. Is he really blind? How does he fight? Is it his sense of smell or hearing? Ren Baqin still found it unbelievable that a blind man could be so powerful. However, if it was his sense of smell, it would be easy to deal with. A fortified smoke bomb would definitely make him wish he was dead. If it was his hearing, a sonic bomb would probably make him regret coming here. It's not the sense of smell and hearing. These two senses are easily affected instead of sight. If he had such a big weakness, he wouldn't be the fourth most powerful expert in the world. The Empress rejected Ren Baqin's idea. Your Majesty is right, Shi Wanya agreed. Maybe he's using his skin to feel the air around him. Either that, or their sense of smell and hearing are more outstanding so that they can avoid their weaknesses as much as possible, Gong Jing said. That's easy. As long as I create a blast of air in the surroundings, won't he become blind again? Ren Baqin immediately came up with an idea. In his mind, it would be very difficult to make such a huge fan. However, it was possible to make a bomb that would set off a shockwave after the explosion to disrupt him. There's no need for that. I want to see what kind of means he has. The Empress interrupted him. I'm guessing that he has a unique way of sensing his surroundings with his spirit. I'm afraid he can see more clearly than a normal person, the Empress explained. Only then did Ren Baqin temporarily suppress the idea of throwing a fortified smoke bomb, a sonic bomb, and an air bomb at the same time. All of you may leave. The Empress waved her hand, stood up, and left the room. Qing Yuan and Hong Wan quickly followed behind her with umbrellas. After the Empress left, Ren Baqin asked, How's Lin Xiaola? She suffered some minor injuries, but it's not a big deal. Shi Wanya added, however, the few people who surrendered to Principal Ren can still be of some use. Originally, I thought that it would be difficult to realize Principal Ren's plan and that it would be easier to just kill them. However, from the looks of it now, they have really surrendered. It's somewhat beyond my expectations. Ren Baqin laughed. He really didn't expect Qingyun's sword and that Lingshan sect's spirit wheel expert to actually lend a hand. In this way, it wouldn't be good for him to treat them too harshly. Renbachian first went to take a look at Lin Xiaola. She was wearing a light undergarment and was sleeping soundly on her back in the room. She seemed to be fine, but her face was a little swollen as if she had been beaten with a stick. Renbachian stretched out his finger and poked her swollen face. She screamed, jumped up, and clawed at Renbachian twice. "It hurts, it hurts, it hurts." Lin Xiaola glared at Renbachian, whose face was all scratched. Renbachian took a deep breath and cursed in his chest. He was the one who was in pain now. "Rest well." Renbachian grabbed a small bag of white rabbit creamy candies and threw it to Lin Xiaola as a reward. However, when he thought about how a bag of white rabbit creamy candies had resulted in a claw mark on his face, Renbachian felt that his good intentions had been f***ed by a dog. He got up and went out to touch his face. There was a trace of blood on his hand. He was disfigured. After a while, Renbachian met Qingyun's sword and Zuocheng from the Lingshan sect in another room with a bloody face. Both of them were mainly focused on restraining the other party, so nothing serious happened. Only Zuocheng was slightly injured and Qingyun's sword was slightly worn out. "Please take a seat. Thank you for your hard work this time." Renbachian smiled and invited them to take a seat. Both of them remained silent. "It couldn't be better for the two of you to make such a choice. I'm not a heartless person, so I can't disappoint the two of you." Renbachian picked up a cup of tea and took a sip. "Previously, I said that I hope that the people of Tianjing Basin and the Aboriginals can be of use to your majesty in the future. Both of you can recommend a few useful people to work under me first. When the time is right, I can find a suitable job for them," Renbachian said with a smile. Upon hearing Renbachian's words, both of their expressions changed. Even though these words were simple, recommending a few people to work under the person in front of them was much better than rewarding them with some benefits. What was the identity of the person in front of them? He was Qi Zixiao's husband. From the looks of it, he had a lot of authority and was highly valued by Qi Zixiao. By working under him, they would at least have a big backer in the Aboriginals' court. In the future, when Tianjing Basin was pacified, the other party would also look up to them. Furthermore, working under him was also the first step for the people of Tianjing Basin. Not to mention the fact that the Prime Minister was a rank 7 official. The benefits of working for him were much greater than those of some low-rank officials. Even if the people of Tianjing Basin left Tianjing Basin in the future, they would still have to bow down to the Aboriginals. However, with his support, it would be a completely different story. Renbachian's words weren't just a benefit to the two of them, but also an attitude and a message to them. "Thank you, sir." Zuocheng cupped his hands and said. Qingyun's sword recalled that day in that room. Someone said that the person in front of them wanted to stabilize his power and occupy a place in the imperial court. Therefore, he wanted them to surrender. Now, it seemed that this possibility was very high. If this was the case, they and the person in front of them would rise or fall together. If the other party fell in the future, they wouldn't be able to get any benefits. However, they had no other choice. Chapter 488. By the time Renbachian returned to his room, it was already very late. The little monk was leaning against the bed and dozing off. His eyes were a little red, and it seemed like he was crying. An 8 or 9-year-old child was suddenly brought to a strange world surrounded by burly men whose arms could run horses. It was normal for the little monk to be frightened. After all, the image of the Aboriginals often gave Renbachian the illusion that he was in a bandit's lair. Now, he was somewhat used to it. After entering the man-wheel level, his strength and weight began to skyrocket, and his muscles bulged. Although he was still very thin and weak compared to the Aboriginals, this was a problem of his small frame. His image was already starting to resemble that of a bandit. Occasionally, he would look in the mirror and reminisce about the handsome and fresh meat of the past. He had to search carefully to find a trace of his own face. Other than his biological parents, there weren't many people who could recognize him now. He didn't become bald, but he became heavier and stronger. This could be seen from the heavyweight and lightweight boxing rings. The more powerful he was, the more oppressive he was. "Wake up. Go sleep in the room next door." Renbachien pushed the little monk awake. Where is this? This was the first thing the little monk said when he opened his eyes. Dayo, Tianjing Basin. You will live here from now on. Will I still be able to see my master? Unless you really become a Buddha, don't even think about seeing your master. Upon hearing this, the little monk burst into tears. This is an opportunity that your master found for you. Renbachien comforted him. After waiting for a long time, the little monk finally calmed down. Go to sleep first. We can talk about the rest later. Renbachien pushed the little monk into the room next door, laid on the bed, and entered the visualization of fire. Inside the room was a volcano. Looking down from the bottom of the mountain, the black mountain peak had streaks of red climbing up and winding down. These red lines were all rivers of lava. The closer it was to the top of the mountain, the denser the lava became, and the higher the temperature. At this moment, the metal chain was near a stream of lava at the foot of the mountain. It arched itself up and tried to dip one end into the lava. Its entire body shivered. Then, it laid comfortably beside the river of lava. From time to time, it would dip one end into the river of lava and then quickly pull it back, shivering all over. Renbachien felt that this guy seemed to be soaking his feet. At the very least, it looked quite realistic. After water and wood, it was now fire, completely following the order of the 5 elements. Presumably, the next one would be earth, and then metal. After completing the visualization of wood, his strength skyrocketed from 700 kilograms to 900 kilograms. His speed, musculoskeletal strength, and ability to take hits had also improved. After completing the visualization of water, Renbachien's kidneys functioned much better. The kidney was a place where essence was stored. It was divided into innate essence and acquired essence, including growth and development. He had gone from 120 kilograms to 200 kilograms, and it seemed like it was still growing. He did not know if it had anything to do with this. In addition, he was full of energy and didn't get tired easily. With regards to this, Renbachien was rather satisfied. Good kidneys were truly good. After completing the visualization of wood, his heart and lungs became stronger. The lungs were connected to the qi in the body. They were responsible for breathing, controlling the skin and hair, and opening the orifices to the nose. However, Renbachien discovered that his lung capacity had greatly increased. He took a deep breath, and like a whale swallowing water, he could hear the sound of the airflow. In the past, he would have drowned in the water in 2 minutes, but now it's 6 minutes? Climbing 30 floors in one go without panting? It seemed to be useless. Furthermore, the shortcomings were very obvious. For example, if he encountered gas poisoning or poisonous gas, he would have to lie down before others could react. In short, the benefits of completing the visualization of wood seemed to be smaller than the visualization of water. However, Renbachien felt that it shouldn't be so simple. With the completion of the visualization of wood, Renbachien finally felt the essence and blood in his body transform into wisps of gas that circulated throughout his body. The smoothness of this part might be related to the lungs. Renbachien had high expectations for the visualization of fire. After all, fire corresponded to the heart, and the heart was the source of power. At the same time, there was also the saying that the heart contained the spirit. Renbachien guessed that completing the visualization of fire would greatly improve his strength. At the same time, it would also nourish his spirit and lay the foundation for the earth wheel level. For the next 2 days, the entire Wu city was tense on the outside, and the atmosphere was even more oppressive. Renbachien and the Empress sat in the courtyard. The Empress rarely spoke. She had been resting with her eyes closed to adjust her condition. She was waiting for Tingyu to come and kill him here and now. She had to calm down every time there was a big battle. After all, he was the 4th most powerful expert in the world. Even if his strength wasn't at its peak, the Empress didn't dare to look down on him. Furthermore, sparring with such an expert was in itself a form of tempering for one's strength. During a battle with an expert, one's entire body's essence, qi, and spirit would fuse into one, and one's mind and spirit would become one. This would allow one to tap into one's potential during a life-and-death confrontation. As a result, after every battle, one's strength would improve to a certain extent. At the Empress's current level, every step forward was very difficult. Furthermore, her status made it very difficult for her to find a suitable opponent. Therefore, regardless of whether it was Feng Sanlu or the previous battle with the numerous spirit will experts from Tianjing Basin, even though there was a reason for it, she was still extremely happy. This battle with Ting Yu was extremely important to her. Ren Baqian stayed by the Empress's side and didn't speak. He only fixed his gaze on the Empress's face and stared fixedly at this heroic face. In particular, those red lips of hers always made him want to kiss them. Ren Baqian's gaze made the Empress's face itch a little. After a long time, she opened her eyes and stared at him. "Have you seen enough?" "I haven't seen enough in my entire life. I always wonder how can there be such a perfect person in this world. It's simply a creation from heaven and earth." Ren Baqian smiled. The Empress wrinkled her nose and wanted to laugh. However, she immediately put on a straight face and said, "I want to rest. Go and do what you need to do." Ren Baqian was chased out of the courtyard by the Empress. He looked up at the sky and was thinking about how to take revenge on that old fart, Xia Baichong. This guy really didn't stop. Previously, the Zhu Mu elders, Lu Qi, and now Ting Yu were all stronger than the other. Ren Baqian didn't know how much he had to spend to hire these people. There was also Su Qing. Although he was a traitor, he was also sent by Xia Baichong to cause trouble for Dayo. He was also the one who sent people to persuade the Yun nation and the Qin nation. At the end of the day, he was originally living well in Lan City, but now he was running around every day. The main culprit for all of this was this old radish. He couldn't possibly be fighting for his life here every day while he led a drunken life in the palace of Great Xia, right? A good neighbor was someone who reciprocated. Why not throw 1,000 skunk bombs at the palace? This time, there was no need for smoke. He could directly throw 1,000 concentrated skunk bombs at the palace of Great Xia. It was guaranteed that the fragrance of the palace would hit the people and linger for 3 months. Ren Baqian had personally experienced the power of concentrated skunk bombs. Its absolute lethality was astonishing and wasn't inferior to any large-scale biological weapons. He didn't believe that he wouldn't vomit blood. As long as he announced that he would take responsibility for this matter in the name of Dayo, Xia Baichong wouldn't be able to tolerate this. He wouldn't even be able to avoid sending troops. Otherwise, where would the dignity of the royal family of Great Xia be? As long as he sent troops again, Su Qing's opportunity would come. When that time came, when Great Xia was in chaos, Ren Baqian would think of ways to stifle Xia Baichong and stab him in the heart. However, no matter how he looked at it, Su Qing would be taking advantage of this situation. Ren Baqian had to scrape some benefits from him. Chapter 489. As time passed, the atmosphere in the city became more and more oppressive. Everyone knew that Ting Yu would come again. If it were any other expert, they would wait for the Empress to recover before fighting her. However, Ting Yu wouldn't do so. Therefore, there was only one possibility. Ting Yu was recuperating. The later he came, the better his recovery would be. On the morning of the 8th day, there were people selling breakfast on the streets. Although it wasn't as lively as before, it was still somewhat lively. As time passed, the residents of Wu City realized that the aboriginals didn't harass the civilians, which made them feel more at ease. Unknowingly, a man appeared in the city. The sound of his bamboo cane tapping on the stone slabs echoed far and wide. Spirit Spear Ting Yu. Not long after he appeared in the city, he was discovered by the winged cavalry. As soon as the news spread, countless people landed on their roofs and stared coldly at the only person walking on the streets. As for the rest, they had long since hidden in their houses. Many people heard someone walking on their roofs and occasionally saw a huge foot trampling on the roofs. They hid in their houses feeling nervous and didn't know what was going on. "Your Majesty, Ting Yu has appeared," a guard hurriedly reported from the garden. "I got it," the Empress said with her eyes closed. "I will report to him when he is almost here." When Ren Baqian heard that the other party was coming, his tensed heart, which had been tense for the past 2 days, felt relieved. Many things were like this. There were all sorts of guesses before it happened, but when it really happened, it was useless to think too much. Now, it all depended on the battle between the Empress and the other party. After a while, someone came to report, "Your Majesty, Teng Yu is 400 steps away from the door." Only then did the Empress open her eyes. The snow-white glow in her eyes was somewhat dazzling to Renbachien. The Empress stood up and walked out. Renbachien whispered to the guard, "Get someone to bring out the box from my room." Inside were the concentrated skunk bombs and sonic bombs that he had just brought back from Earth. Although these things attacked indiscriminately, the Empress had experienced it once and was definitely more resistant to odor than the other party. Furthermore, Renbachien guessed that since the other party was blind, his sense of smell and hearing should be stronger than ordinary people. Therefore, he would be more or less affected. In a fight between experts, this was what they fought for. If the situation was not good, he could throw these two things out. Perhaps it would be effective. There's no need for that. The Empress's voice came from the front. Since he came alone, why would I do such a despicable thing? The Empress replied without turning her head. Upon hearing what Renbachien said, she knew what he was up to. But he's quite despicable. When dealing with people like him, you don't have to be too open and aboveboard, Renbachien whispered. Do you think I'm the same as him? The Empress asked. Her Majesty is accomplished in both literature and martial arts, and has benefited the common people for thousands of years to come. Renbachien immediately changed his tone. Then watch from behind. When everyone left the mansion, they saw an old man dressed in black walking over from the other end of the street with a bamboo cane in his hand. The sound of the bamboo cane hitting the stone floor reached everyone's ears. Renbachien sized him up carefully. Was this the spirit spear Teng Yu? He looked to be in his 50s or 60s, with a goatee and a face full of wrinkles. His ordinary facial features looked disgusting when they were squeezed onto his face. Cheesy Xiao, I paid a visit last time, but I didn't expect to leave empty-handed. Now, I finally see you in person. Very good, Teng Yu said loudly as he stopped 50 meters in front of everyone. With your strength, there are only a handful of people in this world who can defeat you, and there aren't many who are worthy of you. You and I are a perfect match. Why don't you marry me? Even though I don't have anything valuable on me, I can still take out a mere betrothal gift. Teng Yu's old face was smiling like a dead chrysanthemum, and he even revealed a mouthful of rotten teeth. No matter how Renbachien looked at him, he felt a surge of anger rising from the bottom of his heart, and he wanted to suppress this old bastard in a cesspit. You said the same thing twice. Don't you have anything else to say? You left the last time, and this time, you specially came to deliver your head. I'll keep it, the Empress said faintly. So your injuries have recovered? No wonder you are so confident. However, there are at least 8,000 to 10,000 people who want my head. Cheesy Xiao, if you want my head, I'm afraid you will have to queue for another 100 years. Teng Yu carefully sensed and then laughed. Did Xia Baichong send you alone? Renbachien interrupted. He wanted to know if Teng Yu was the only one, or if there were other people who had entered Tianjing Basin. Xia Baichong? Hee, but you are wrong. I wasn't sent by him. His things in exchange for a favor from me. It's just a transaction. You are Cheesy Xiao's lover? You are just a little worm. Commit suicide. Teng Yu chuckled. The last 3 words were like a demonic sound that poured into Renbachien's ears. He used a special method to say these 3 words. It could only be used to deal with people who were much weaker than him, but it could affect the mood of others with his voice and make them feel that what he said was right. However, when these 3 words entered Renbachien's mind, he immediately felt that what Teng Yu said was right. There was indeed no meaning in living, and it was better to die. His eyes turned gray. At this moment, the metal chain that was soaking his feet in his sea of knowledge suddenly sprang up. The metal chain, which was only a few meters long, suddenly extended into the sky. It went beyond the volcano and even the sky. In Renbachien's sea of knowledge, it looked as if it was standing between heaven and earth and connected to the fields. In just a moment, the metal chain retracted and turned into a spherical cage at one end. Inside the cage, There was a worm-like thing that was moving left and right. The metal chain shook the spherical cage from side to side as if it had found something fun and was reluctant to let go. Renbachien became absent-minded for a moment before coming back to his senses. He immediately realized that he was almost hit by this move just now. The others weren't affected, and it was obviously targeted at him. He immediately opened his mouth and scolded, "It takes a lot of courage to live in this world with your appearance. You are wasting food and polluting the environment while you are alive. If you die, you will be making a small contribution to the beautiful lives of the people of the world. Why don't you commit suicide? Even if it's not for the sake of others, it's on account of the fact that your mother used to live and exist in this world. You have polluted the world that she once lived in. You are simply unworthy of being a son. Remember to drown yourself in the toilet so that your corpse doesn't contaminate the soil elsewhere." Teng Yu was stunned. Renbachien wasn't affected by him at all and even scolded him? And he even scolded him in such a nasty way? Where did all these curses come from? Following that, Teng Yu smiled sinisterly and said, "Sharp-tongued brat, I'll tear your mouth in a while. Let's see if you can still curse then. You won't have that chance. I will crush your head in front of the palace square," the Empress said coldly. "Build a public toilet on top of it and soak your head in it. You can go in and take a dump on the head of the world's fourth strongest expert for just 1 copper coin. I'm sure many people would be interested. You can also pay 20 copper coins a month and 2 taels of silver a year. You will also be given a VIP seat in the public toilets, priority access, no queues, and free toilet paper," Renbachien added. "I'm quite interested, Sa." Shi Wanya burst out laughing. "I'm also interested." Zhong Shen and Qing Ping laughed loudly. Courting death. Teng Yu's face darkened completely. The bamboo cane in his hand shattered, and a spear appeared in his hand. He pointed it at the crowd. No matter how bad his character was, he was still the 4th in the world. Who would dare to insult him like this? Moreover, Renbachien's scolding was so nasty that even he couldn't stand it. When it came to scolding people, he was really no match for that kid. He didn't gain any advantage verbally, but he almost went crazy with anger. Soak his head in the toilet? Charge fees. That was simply courting death. Even though his character wasn't worth mentioning, he was still one of the top experts in the world. His spear technique was extremely terrifying. His spear moved the wind and clouds, and the air in Wu City seemed to be stirred up by it. Everyone felt the surrounding airflow start to spin, and a gale started to blow. Even though Teng Yu was still standing in his original spot, his spear tore through the air, and the silver tip of the spear occupied everyone's field of vision. Even an Iron Man would be torn to pieces by this spear. This was the terror of the 4th most powerful expert in the world. The Empress moved and struck with her palm. Boom! A wave of air forced everyone to retreat. If Shi Wanya wasn't waiting, Renbachien would have been able to kite the Empress. The walls around them collapsed, followed by the houses in the courtyard. The stone slabs on the ground between them turned into powder. There was even a 3-meter wide and 5-meter deep gully on the ground. This was the mark of this spear attack. Boom! The buildings on both sides collapsed with a loud rumble. Crash! Amidst the broken tiles, a head with a face full of dust and dirt popped out. Chapter 490. Boom, boom, boom. As the two of them fought, the buildings on the street collapsed one by one. A black and a red figure shuttled back and forth amidst the rising dust. Teng Yu flicked his spear on the ground, sending pieces of stone slabs flying toward the Empress. However, they were turned into dust by her jade-like palms. Purple thunder! Teng Yu shouted as the spear in his hand turned into a Z-shaped bolt of lightning and struck at the Empress. The Empress continued to resist with her bare palms. Shockwaves rippled in the air and swept in all directions, causing another building to collapse. Renbachien was dazzled by the battle. The purple pattern on the Empress's face was so beautiful that it made his heart palpitate incessantly. He wanted to sing a song, but he lacked an eru. How much of Teng Yu's strength has recovered? Renbachien asked Shi Wanya. With his eyesight, he could only watch the show and couldn't see much. Most of the time, he couldn't even see the figures clearly. Occasionally, he would see the Empress's red clothes fluttering in the wind. Her skin was covered with purple patterns, which made her look mysterious and beautiful. I can't tell, but it's at least 80%. Maybe even 90%. Shiwanya said in a deep voice. What are the chances of winning, Your Majesty? Swallow the mountain. Teng Yu shouted again as the spear in his hand turned into a giant golden python. It bared its snow-white teeth and opened its mouth to swallow the Empress. The Empress didn't seem to know how to dodge. From the start of the battle until now, she hadn't retreated or dodged at all. Renbaqian recalled watching the Empress fight with the spirit wheel experts from Tianjing Basin. She didn't seem to dodge at all and mostly fought hard with her bare palms. At this moment, the Empress twisted her slender waist in the air, turned half a circle, and waved her fingers up and down as if she was tearing something apart. Before the golden python in the air could even touch the Empress, it was immediately torn apart from its mouth and turned into golden specks of light. A spear flew back into Teng Yu's hand. Prison suppression. Teng Yu caught the spear with one hand, spun it half a circle in the air, and bent the body of the spear into the shape of a bow. Before the spear even landed, the air below the spear was pushed to the sides, and a gully even appeared on the ground. In Renbaqian's eyes, he didn't see a spear strike. Instead, he saw a black mountain sitting on the tip of the spear and pressing down on the Empress. Boom! Both parties collided again, and the Empress was smashed down from the sky, creating a huge crater on the ground. The black mountain in the sky disappeared. Teng Yu's spear bounced up high, drew a big circle behind him, and shot straight down at the Empress. Renbaqian's heart tightened. However, at this moment, the Empress was in the pit and couldn't see anything. Teng Yu went down quickly, but he came up even faster. As he somersaulted, he flew upward and completed a 3,600-degree free turn in the air before he regained his balance. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. A red figure soared into the sky and collided with Teng Yu again. Renbaqian's palms were sweating as he watched from below. In theory, the Empress shouldn't be weaker than Teng Yu. After all, Teng Yu was still injured and hadn't fully recovered. However, this was only in theory. No one knew if Teng Yu had any trump cards. Moreover, in a battle between experts, victory or defeat was determined by a fine line. Being weaker didn't mean that one wouldn't lose. Fortunately, both of them were equal in strength. Even if there was a fine line between victory and defeat, their lives wouldn't be in danger. Renbaqian still had Shiwanya and the others on his side. Even though they were all seriously injured, it shouldn't be a problem to restrain Teng Yu. Even if the Empress lost, her life wouldn't be in danger. Stop pulling. Renbaqian slapped the hand that was tugging at his clothes. It was a tender and smooth little hand. Renbaqian turned his head and saw Lin Xiaola sitting behind him. Her face was covered in dirt, and she was drooling as she stared at the bag of sweets hanging on his waist. He grabbed a handful of sweets for Lin Xiaola. Renbaqian turned his head and saw a red figure being smashed down. Boom! Heaven's net! Teng Yu shouted. It was as if countless meteors appeared in the sky and smashed toward the Empress. In fact, they were countless spear shadows that emitted a golden glow. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of metal colliding could be heard coming from the huge pit. Earth net! Teng Yu's voice was heard. A golden ray of light that was far more dazzling than the other spear shadows pierced straight into the earth. Renbaqian immediately felt a violent tremor coming from under his feet. Not good. Shiwanya's expression changed. Without thinking, he grabbed Renbaqian's clothes and jumped out. Qin Yuan and Hong Wan were also brought away by Zhong Xin and Qin Ping. Just as everyone left the ground was covered with countless cracks. Following which, spear energy shot up into the sky. This area was filled with streaks of spear energy. Bang! Teng Yu collided with the Empress again, but this time, he was charging toward everyone like lightning. Where do you think you're going? Shiwanya shouted. The long saber on his back appeared in his hand, and a snow-white saber light swept up like a waterfall from the bottom to the top. When he made his move, he threw Renbaqian toward Qin Ping. However, at this moment, Ting Yu's spear tapped on the saber light. His body made a turn and swept past Ting Yu. Not good. Qing Ping shouted angrily, but it was already too late. Ren Baqian was originally thrown into the air. Fortunately, he was used to being thrown and didn't panic. Just as he expected, a big hand grabbed his collar and caught him. However, why was he getting further and further away from everyone? Ting Yu, you are one of the top experts in the world. How could you do such a thing? Why aren't you putting Principal Rin down? Qing Ping grabbed Hong Wan and landed on a pile of rubble while shouting at Ting Yu. Ren Baqian? F***CK, I was caught by this old bastard Ting Yu? The person behind me is Ting Yu? Ren Baqian's forehead was immediately drenched in sweat, and his heart felt as if it was being squeezed tightly by a big hand. Let him go! The Empress bounced up again as soon as she landed and chased after them. Qi Zixiao, you better stop. Otherwise, I will strangle him now. Ting Yu's gloomy voice sounded behind Ren Baqian. I'm finished. Ren Baqian felt like cursing 10,000 times. Following Ting Yu's words, Ren Baqian finally landed on the ground, but he felt that his legs were a little weak. Ting Yu, what are you trying to do? The Empress asked coldly as she landed about 50 meters away from them. The Empress's current condition wasn't too good. Many parts of her body were broken, revealing blood-red wounds. You actually stopped. It seems like you value this fellow quite a lot. Ting Yu laughed mischievously. It's just that I feel that if we fight to the death, I won't be able to leave with so many of you here. If you hurt him, even if I have to go to the ends of the earth, I will still kill you and dismember you into 1,000 pieces. Ren Baqian, Your Majesty, aren't you telling the other party that I'm a good handle? Should I ask Your Majesty to leave me alone and take revenge for me, or should I ask Your Majesty not to be impulsive? Ting Yu laughed mischievously behind Ren Baqian. Even without turning his head, Ren Baqian could hear the meaning behind these words. Soon after, he felt himself being thrown backward. Following which, he felt a sharp pain in his body as a spear nailed him to the wall. After being nailed to the wall by a spear, Ren Baqian felt his vision turn black and almost fainted from the pain. Even though the spear didn't pierce his vital points, it did pierce through the area below his shoulder blade. The waves of pain stimulated his brain. Ting Yu stood 2 meters in front of Ren Baqian and said calmly, Qi Zixiao, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? I will definitely kill you. The Empress's voice was filled with murderous intent. Since you are going to kill me anyway, it doesn't matter if this fellow lives or dies. Coincidentally, I hate that mouth of his, so I might as well tear it apart. Ting Yu laughed heartily. How dare you? The Empress glared at him and subconsciously took a step forward. Don't move. Ting Yu slapped the shaft of the spear with the back of his hand. The spear was immediately nailed in a few centimeters, and the pain made Ren Baqian's vision turn black. Ting Yu, you are simply courting death. Shi Wanya, Qing Ping, and the others caught up and glared at Ting Yu. Why don't you slap yourself with your palm and lower your strength by 30%? Then we can fight again. With so many of you around, I can feel at ease. Ting Yu looked at the Empress and laughed. The Empress stared at him in silence. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Shi Wanya hurriedly shouted. All right. The Empress raised her palm. Your Majesty! Everyone cried out. The Empress stared intently at Ting Yu, as well as Ren Baqian, who was behind him. Attract his attention. Ren Baqian mouthed. Even though he was in so much pain that his vision turned black, he didn't make any sound. Your Majesty! Everyone was still shouting. Noisy! The Empress slapped her palm to the side, and a gust of air immediately sent Shi Wanya flying. Good. Not bad, you're indeed loyal and sentimental. Ting Yu laughed loudly when he saw this. Just as Ting Yu was laughing, he suddenly felt that something was amiss behind him. He swatted his palm behind him, but unexpectedly he missed. He slammed into the wall behind him, smashing it into pieces. But he was gone, and so was his gun. Shi Wanya, Qing Ping, Zhong Shen, Lin Xiaola, Qing Yun's sword, and Zhuo Cheng. Except for Ting Yu, Everyone clearly saw Rinpoche disappear from the wall with Ting Yu's gun. Chapter 491. When Rinpoche returned to earth, his legs went soft, and he fell to his knees. When the spear hit the ground, he almost fainted from the pain, but he didn't dare to pull it out. If he pulled it out from such a wound, he would definitely lose a lot of blood. Furthermore, he lived far away from the city, and he didn't want to test the hemostasis ability of his visualization of wood. If he made a mistake, he would be cremated by the time the ambulance arrived. After panting for a long time, Rinpoche supported his body and staggered to the second floor to make a call. "Shenfeng, call the ambulance to my house. If it's any later, you will lose your job." Rinpoche's voice was a little weak, but it was still stable. The most dangerous moment was before he came back. After all, it took about 1 second for him to transmigrate. When the Empress discovered that he had transmigrated, she rushed over from a few meters away to catch him. He was really afraid that if Ting Yu found out and brought him back, he would really die a tragic death. Fortunately, Ting Yu was distracted by the Empress at that time, and it was already too late by the time he realized it. For a moment just now, he really felt that he was going to die. After all, the fourth most powerful expert in the world was so despicable that even the Empress couldn't save him if he fell into his hands. Fortunately, he was careless and used the spear to pin him to the wall to provoke the Empress. This gave him a chance. Otherwise, the grass on his grave would be 5 feet tall by this time next year. Rinpoche leaned against the bed and pressed the tip of the spear against it. This way, the force of the spear's fall was reduced, and the pain from the wound was lessened. Even though it was better than nothing, it more or less made him feel better. After feeling slightly better, Rinpoche started to laugh. He wasn't dead, but that bastard Ting Yu was going to die. The fourth most powerful expert in the world? Rinpoche wondered what kind of expression he would have when he realized that his heaven-grade weapon, which he had painstakingly built his entire life, had disappeared. It would definitely be a sight to behold. He really wanted to see it with his own eyes. However, he probably wouldn't have the chance to do so. If a group of people couldn't stop Ting Yu without his spear, then he wouldn't be the fourth most powerful expert in the world, but the #1 expert in the world. As he let his imagination run wild, he watched as blood flowed along the golden veins on the spear and gradually formed a pool of blood. He still didn't hear the sound of the ambulance. Rinpoche began to feel anxious. He called Shenfeng again to confirm that she wasn't far away and felt a little more at ease. The golden patterns on the spear looked as if they were carved into the spear. One could feel the uneven surface of the spear with their hands, which served as a blood groove. Although each of the lines was very shallow, there were many of them. The following period of time was simply torturous. Rinpoche felt his strength begin to drain away, his body became weaker and weaker, and his head began to feel dizzy. The iron chain emerged from the top of his head. After twisting a few times, it wrapped itself around the body of the spear as if it wanted to pull the spear out. The metal chain in Rinpoche's body also sensed danger. If Rinpoche died, it would lose its place of existence and vanish in a puff of smoke. The movement of the metal chain pulling the spear jolted Rinpoche out of his daze, and he hurriedly stopped it. Fortunately, he heard the sound of an ambulance coming from afar and stopping in front of the courtyard. Then, they stopped outside the villa and knocked on the door a few times. Rinpoche could hear the sounds coming from downstairs, but he didn't have the strength to get up and go to the window to call for them. Fortunately, a moment later, someone opened the door with a key. It was probably Shenfeng who had arrived at the same time as the ambulance. Following the trail of blood, the group hurried to the second floor and found Rinpoche, who had been pierced by a spear with golden lines. Everyone was astonished. Firstly, they were astonished by the spear. Secondly, they were astonished by the clothes that Rinpoche was wearing. After all, he was still wearing Dayo's official uniform. "Boss, how are you feeling?" Shenfeng didn't hide the astonishment on her face as she hurriedly ran over and asked. "I'm still alive. It's hard to say if we don't save him now," Rinpoche replied weakly. The group of people didn't dare to touch the spear on Rinpoche's body and hurriedly carried him sideways to the ambulance. However, the spear was nearly 2 meters long, and it was inevitable that it would bump into something. This caused Rinpoche to grimace in pain. His hatred for Tengyu couldn't even be washed away by the torrential river. After getting into the ambulance, Rinpoche finally relaxed. Just now, when he came out, he saw some people standing in the distance. They were presumably from the Messier 87 department. It was impossible for them to not know about such a big matter. Since they knew, they wouldn't let him die so easily. Compared to the hospital, Rinpoche had more faith in the strength of the Messier 87 department. As the vehicle started moving, Rinpoche's vision turned black, and he gradually fell asleep. That spear is gone. Rinpoche had just fainted when chaos broke out in the ambulance. That was because the ancient spear with golden veins had suddenly disappeared. The person who had been pressing down on Rinpoche's blood vessels to help him stop the bleeding was in a flurry. Finally, he managed to stop the bleeding. When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, many people rushed into the emergency room to treat Rinpoche. In fact, his problem wasn't difficult to deal with, and it was easier to stop the bleeding. After all, his ability to stop bleeding was much stronger than ordinary people. However, Rinpoche's problem was that he couldn't get a blood transfusion. His blood type was very ordinary, but his body was extremely resistant to other people's blood. It seems that when one's strength reaches a certain level, the body will change from the inside out, including the blood. A few doctors who had never appeared in this hospital before looked at each other, and someone beside them immediately recorded it down. When Rinpoche woke up, it was already 2 days later. He was awakened by hunger in his stomach, and it was as if his internal organs were rebelling. As mentioned before, his injuries weren't considered serious, and Tengyu didn't pierce his vital organs. However, he had lost a lot of blood, and he couldn't receive a blood transfusion, so he was relatively weak. "Boss, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" Shen Feng was sitting by the bed and playing with her phone. "Let's hear the bad news first," Rinpoche said weakly. He wondered if there was something wrong with his body. "You have kidney stones and liver stones. Do you want them removed?" Shen Feng asked. Rinpoche's face turned green when he heard this. He had cultivated the visualization of water and visualization of wood, and they corresponded to the kidney and liver. He wouldn't believe that there was nothing wrong with them. He gritted his teeth and said, "I will smash the head of anyone who dares to remove my stones." "Boss, are you really not going to reconsider? Kidney stones can cause urination difficulties and kidney dysfunction," Shen Feng asked. Rinpoche looked at her with a murderous gaze, which made her shiver, and she quickly swallowed her words. "What's the good news?" Rinpoche asked again. "Boss, you are fine. You just need to rest for a period of time. This is good news, right?" Shen Feng said with a smile. With such a smile on that neutral and cold face, he looked a little more like a woman. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this and said to Shen Feng, "Hurry up and get me something to eat. Enough for 10 people. 20 minutes later, Rinpoche asked while drinking porridge, "Where's the gun?" "It disappeared. It disappeared not long after you were carried to the ambulance." Shen Feng was surprised when she mentioned this matter. "Boss, what's that?" "You will know when you have the chance in the future." Rinpoche waved his hand. However, he would have to wait until a spirit wheel expert and a heaven-grade weapon appeared on Earth. Since the gun had disappeared, it should be the same as the metal chain. Tengyu was probably dead by now. After drinking an entire bucket of porridge, Rinpoche finally felt alive. Although he was still weak, it was only a matter of time before he recovered. After finishing his meal, Rinpoche closed his eyes and entered the visualization of fire. He saw a long spear covered in golden veins and a silver-white metal chain leaning against each other on a river of lava. It was as if they were living together, soaking their feet. The spear trembled a few times when Rinpoche came in and ignored him. The metal chain didn't care about him at all. It stuck one end into the lava, trembled and pulled it back. After a long time, it stuck it in again. Rinpoche, who had already experienced it once, wasn't too surprised. He just felt a toothache looking at these two fellows. The iron chain and the long spear had both settled down in his sea of consciousness. Would he have to gather 18 types of weapons in the future? When he reached the spirit wheel level and subdued them, he would be able to show off the 18 types of weapons in a fight. Even if he couldn't beat his opponent, he could still intimidate them with 18 heaven-grade weapons. Chapter 492. Principal Ren, Her Majesty is waiting for you. All of a sudden, Rinpoche returned to the streets of Dayo from his room. The glaring and scorching sun made him unable to open his eyes for a moment. Then he heard Gong Zheng's voice. Rinpoche squinted his eyes and began to size up his surroundings. The surroundings were in ruins, and the original appearance of the street could no longer be seen. Dozens of winged cavalry warriors were standing there, and Captain Gong Zheng was standing beside him. He didn't know how long he had been waiting. Teng Yu is dead? Rinpoche turned his head and asked. I'll leave the remaining head for Principal Ren. Gong Zheng grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. At that time his gun was missing. Wasn't that exciting? This was what Rinpoche was concerned about. This was the fourth most powerful expert in the world, and he was slightly stronger than the Empress. Rinpoche really wanted to see what kind of expression he would have when the heaven-grade weapon that he had painstakingly created for decades disappeared. Gong Zheng's expression immediately turned strange. One had to know that heaven-grade weapons were condensed from spirits. They could be broken, but they couldn't be snatched away. This was common knowledge. However, this understanding was shattered by the person in front of him. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Principal Rin disappeared with that gun. He would never forget Teng Yu's expression and mournful howl. Even on the brink of death, Teng Yu was still trying to summon his divine weapon. After listening to Gong Zheng's account of what happened after he disappeared, Rinpoche burst into laughter. You stabbed me with your spear and I stole your spear. No matter what, he finally felt that he had gotten his revenge. Under the protection of many winged cavalry warriors, Rinpoche truly witnessed the destructive power of this battle. It was estimated that at least 1/10 of the city had been turned into ruins. Broken walls and debris could be seen everywhere along the street. The stone slabs that were originally laid on the ground had also disappeared, and large pits could be seen everywhere. Looking into the distance, even part of the city wall had collapsed. Teng Yu wanted to escape, but unfortunately he did not succeed. If it was the max level of 10, he had put 10 points into his spear skill points and 5 points into his boxing skill points. Without the divine weapon, the final result could be seen. As for the 2 bamboo spears in Wu City, ordinary weapons simply couldn't withstand the strength of a spirit wheel expert. What are the casualties? Rinpoche asked. This time, we all hid far away, so it's fine. Where are the civilians? Rinpoche pointed around. A few hundred. They were all affected by the aftermath. I saw that they dug out a lot of them from the ruins. Gong Zheng scratched his head. He had not paid much attention to this matter. Almost all of the largest mansions in Wu City were in that area, but now they were all in ruins. This time around, they occupied a large courtyard. The Empress occupied the one with the best view. The courtyard could only be described as ordinary, but the original owner must have decorated it meticulously. There were flowers everywhere in the courtyard, and they weren't neat like ordinary courtyards. Instead, there were many kinds of flowers planted together. The effect was very unique, and it had a unique sense of beauty. In addition, the fragrance of these flowers gathered together to form a very pleasant smell. As soon as Rinpoche walked into the courtyard, he felt refreshed. Your Majesty, I missed you so much. Rinpoche shouted when he saw the Empress. After going through another round of life and death, Rinpoche felt especially amiable when he saw the Empress. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. There are no more candies. Rinpoche, Your Majesty, I almost died. Can't we be a little more gentle? Rinpoche sighed. If she was gentle, she wouldn't be the Empress. Your Majesty, how are your injuries? Rinpoche walked to the Empress's side, sat down, and asked softly. Not a big deal. Will it take another month this time? Renbachian asked subconsciously. When he saw the Empress raise her eyebrows, he knew that he had guessed correctly. The Empress just didn't want to make a move. If she did, she would definitely be injured. She would definitely be injured. Thinking about the fifth most powerful person in the world. Now, she was the fourth most powerful person in the world. It was such a sad story. Which expert in the novels and movies didn't have a sword that could chill 14 continents? Then, they would leave with a wave of their sleeves, and they would float away like an immortal. Each was more pretentious than the other. For example, Lu Xiaofeng and Shimin Chueshue, who would be seriously injured every time they made a move. In any case, they would be seriously injured if they won and seriously injured if they lost. Oh, they hadn't lost yet. However, they would still be seriously injured every time. Do you have a problem with that? The Empress saw Renbachian's strange expression and looked at him with a murderous look. She squinted her beautiful eyes. Your Majesty, you are wise and virtuous. You will unify the world for thousands of generations. Renbachian exclaimed. The Empress then ignored him. Your Majesty, do you like this courtyard? I think the garden outside is quite unique. Renbachian changed the topic. Not bad. It's a bit rustic. The Empress said faintly. The palace happens to lack a gardener. Why don't we get someone to send him and his family to the palace to take care of the garden for your Majesty? That's exactly what I want. The Empress nodded. Also, I saw a good carpenter previously and can get someone to send him back to the palace. Tianjing Basin still has some talents. The people in the palace are all clumsy and can't do such meticulous work. The Empress deeply agreed with Renbachian's words. It was indeed difficult for her people to do such meticulous work. Renbachian chatted with the Empress for a while. After lunch, he said, I'm going to see how the little monk, Qingyun Sword, and the others are doing. Go. The Empress waved her hand. Renbachian walked to the door before turning his head and saying, Your Majesty, if something like this happens again, avenge me. Thump. The Empress's wine pot smashed directly on his head. Renbachian was drenched and reeked of sorghum wine. Then, another cup. Then, a table. Renbachian quickly ran away with his head full of sorghum wine. He sighed in his heart. It was rare for him to be so heroic, but the Empress didn't even give him a chance to perform. Sigh, such is life. Renbachian sighed. However, the Empress's performance made him feel happy from the bottom of his heart. Where's Ting Yu's body? Renbachian ran out of the courtyard and asked the guards. It's hanging on top of the city wall. Upon hearing this, Renbachian hurriedly got someone to bring a fork-horned cow and ride it to the top of the city wall. He saw a head hanging high above the city wall. The connection between the head and the body was uneven, and it looked like it had been broken off by someone. As for the head, it had long been beaten to the point that it was unrecognizable. Is there nothing else? Renbachian asked. There is something else. Her Majesty has already soaked it in ash and is preparing to display it for a period of time before bringing it back to Lan City and burying it in the square in front of the palace. Bring me there. Since there were other things, Renbachian was prepared to bring them back to Earth for the Messier 87 department to study. As for this head, it was better to leave it here. After all, there were spirits in this world, and Ting Yu's heaven-grade weapon was still soaking in his sea of knowledge. He didn't know if there were any remnants in this head. In the past, Renbachian felt that the Aboriginals' habit of burying the corpses of their enemies was a superstition of an uncivilized race. Now that he had more contact with them, he didn't dare to think so anymore. He had always been by the Empress's side, hadn't been to many places, and hadn't seen many things. Perhaps there were demons and monsters deep in the mountains and forests. Ning Kaichen had mentioned this to him in the past, but he had always treated it as bragging. Now that he thought about it, there might really be something in this world. If it existed, it was most likely to be in the head. Chapter 493. How have you been these few days? Renbachian felt a sense of closeness to the little monk in front of him. After all, he had brought the little monk from Earth. It could be said that the little monk was his only fellow countryman in this world, and he was still such a young child. Even Rinpoche couldn't help but pay some attention to him. Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the little monk was on the verge of crying. He stuttered, "This place is so scary. The people here are so scary." The fiercest person he had seen in the temple was the president of the commandment yard, who always had a straight face. But compared to the people here, he was really kind. If he had to choose, he would rather face the president of the commandment yard every day. Not only were the people here twice as strong as ordinary people, but they also looked fierce. Many of them had scars on their faces and bodies. Even if they smiled at you, you would still be afraid. Not to mention, there was an earth-shattering battle that razed a large area of houses to the ground. All of this caused the little monk to live in fear for the past 2 days. "Fake, it's all fake," Rinpoche immediately said. "Your negative karma is too heavy, so everything you see is scary. This place is like Azura hell. In fact, this is because your negative karma has obscured your vision. Everything you see is fake. The people here are actually kind and benevolent, but you've been deceived." After saying that, Rinpoche gave himself a thumbs up. He really had the root of wisdom. He had such attainments just by reading Buddhist scriptures. This level of talent was probably unmatched by others. But they demolished the houses. They are preparing to demolish this place and rebuild it. "You lied to me." The little monk burst into tears. "I saw a human head. It was so scary." Those were extremely vicious people who had to resort to thunderous means. Even Buddhism has a glaring vajra, let alone the secular world. There are many extremely vicious people here, so your master asked you to follow me to pass down the teachings of Buddhism and enlighten those who haven't committed any serious crimes. "Is that so?" the little monk asked while sobbing. "Will your master push you into the fire pit?" The little monk thought for a moment, then burst into tears again. "Master must have found out that I stole his tea, tore his underwear, peed on his bed, roasted the rabbit in the mountain, stewed the fish in the lotus pond, killed so many mosquitoes, knocked over the everlasting lamp in front of the Buddha, ate the fruits on the tree, and even told Lingguor that I would renounce asceticism and marry her when I grow up." Pooh! Rinpoche almost spat out the tea in his mouth. He looked at the pitiful little monk and thought to himself, "You deserve to die. If I were your master, you would have been dead by now. Basically, you've done everything a monk shouldn't do." To be able to do so many things at such a young age, he must be a talent. Rinpoche comforted the little monk a few more times. After a long time, the little monk Xing Ruo finally stopped sobbing. In the future, we'll have to rely on passing down the Dharma. However, this place was different from the Tranquil Temple. If you went to the Tranquil Temple, you would come into contact with people who had a certain understanding of the Buddhist Dharma. In other words, in the place where you used to live, even the most ignorant person would have heard the phrase, Amitabha. However, here, no one knows about Buddhism, and no one knows what you're doing. As for the future, it's up to you. Whether you can stand firm here and be believed by people will depend on you. If you can cultivate to perfection one day, you might be able to meet your master. "I understand," Xing Ruo said with reddened eyes. "I can't teach you these things. You'll have to rely on yourself in the future. Think about it first." After the little monk left, Rinpoche shook his head. Xing Ruo was too young. He hoped that Su Wen didn't send him here for no reason. He hoped that Xing Ruo could achieve what he wanted to see. Not long after the little monk left, before Rinpoche sent someone to look for Qingyun's sword and Teng Qingshan, they came to visit first. When they saw Su Wen, they stared at him for a long time. Su Wen's abduction of Ting Yu's heaven-grade weapon was more of a shock to them than to the Aboriginals. After all, the Aboriginals didn't cultivate their souls and focused on tempering their bodies. Although they were surprised by this matter, they weren't too shocked. However, they were different. When they thought about how the heaven-grade weapon, which they had painstakingly condensed, disappeared just like that, they felt like dying. They really wanted to know how Rinpoche did it. "Have you made arrangements for your men? Are there any problems?" Rinpoche didn't care about their gazes and asked first. Everything has been arranged, the two answered. They were only affected by the shockwaves at the periphery and weren't affected much. That's good. Ren Baqin nodded. Did something happen for the two of you to come all the way here? Sir, the candidates have been selected. When will they come to look for you? Zuoqing asked. Let them look for Gong Zheng tomorrow morning and let him inform me, Ren Baqin said. He then thought of something and asked, the people we sent out should be arriving soon, right? Is there any news? It's about time, but there hasn't been any news yet. I'm afraid we'll have to wait for some time, Qingyun Sword said. Inform me if there's any news. In addition, you guys don't have to stay there anymore. You can let them out every day. However, if anyone runs away, kill 2 of them. Start with those who are close to you. If a son runs away, kill his parents. If a disciple runs away, kill his master. If there's no one close to you, draw lots. Whoever gets caught will be unlucky. I'm giving you preferential treatment because I'm kind and giving you a chance. I hope you remember not to make mistakes and ruin your own path. If there's anyone who doesn't know their place, it's best to settle it yourself so that others won't be implicated, Ren Baqin said faintly. The two of them tensed up when they heard Ren Baqin's words. Although this person in front of them wasn't very powerful, his mind was like that of an evil spirit. If everyone had been imprisoned there, nothing would have happened. However, Ren Baqin allowed everyone to move freely in the city. This meant that he wanted them to personally deal with those who didn't know their place. There was also the news that he had previously sent to the south. Ever since Qingyun Sword and the others surrendered, they had been forced to slide down the abyss step by Ren Baqin and were unable to escape. This person's mind was as vicious as that of an evil spirit. They really didn't know how much hatred there would be in Tianjing Basin in the future and how much trust there would be left. You may leave. Ren Baqin waved his hand. After the two of them left, he went to look for the Empress. He accompanied the Empress to look at the flowers in the courtyard and casually told her about this matter. The Empress replied absent-mindedly. These kinds of conspiracies and tricks weren't her cup of tea. She preferred to be straightforward. Your Majesty, shall I read your palm? Ren Baqin saw that she wasn't interested and didn't mention it again. He reached out and grabbed one of the Empress's fingers. You used this trick last time. The Empress rolled her eyes. Can't you show some sincerity? In that case, let's read your palm this time. Ren Baqin immediately scrutinized the Empress's face. Recently, I've been practicing Buddhism and have benefited a lot. Chapter 494. Xing Ruo pushed open the door and saw a murderous guard standing outside. He was 1.9 meters tall and weighed more than 150 kilograms. Half of his body was covered in leather armor and was covered in scars. Xing Ruo's calves immediately cramped up. Fake, fake. Xing Ruo muttered to himself twice in his heart. He forced himself to calm down, turned around, and gently closed the door. Then he tiptoed outside. Even though he had always behaved like an ordinary kid and was a little timid, Ren Baqin always doubted whether he could do well. However, he was sent by Su Wen and naturally wasn't a slow-witted person. After thinking for 2 days in his room, he figured it out and was ready to take the first step out of this residence to take a look. That guard turned his head to look at him. The way he looked at him as if he was examining his prey immediately made Xing Ruo shiver. He quickly lowered his head and hurriedly walked out. It's fake, it's fake, it's fake. They are all kind-looking good people. It's all because of negative karma? Xing Ruo kept muttering in his heart. Then, he bumped into the person who was entering the courtyard and was knocked over. Well, kid, watch where you walk. Gong Zheng was the one who bumped into him. He knew that this little baldy was related to Ren Baqin, so he lowered his head to pick him up and put him on the ground. This process was no different from picking up a doll. Where are you going? Gong Zheng stood there like a wall, blocking even the sunlight and casting a shadow over Xing Ruo. Coupled with his sinister smile, Xing Ruo pouted and looked like he was about to cry. Fake, it's all fake. Xing Ruo shouted with his eyes closed. What's fake? Gong Zheng scratched his head. Was this little baldy a fool? Xing Ruo opened his eyes and trembled as he said, "You are a good person." Of course, whoever dares to say that I'm not a good person, I will tear him apart, pull out his intestines, wrap them around his neck, and strangle him to death. Finally, I will chop him into meat paste and feed him to the babe beast. Gong Zheng sneered. Xing Ruo was frightened by Gong Zheng's ferocity and almost turned around to run back to his room. But thinking that he could only rely on himself now, Xing Ruo suppressed his fear and stood there trembling. "It's fake. Actually, you're kind and benevolent. It's just that the negative karma has covered my eyes." Gong Zheng? Kind-looking and kind? Kind and kind? Was he referring to himself? It should be, right? That seemed to be the case. "Amit Ba, I want to go out," Xing Ruosui said with a trembling voice. "Oh, be careful." Gong Zheng scratched his head. Hearing this ferocious-looking man in front of him tell him to be careful, Xing Ruo instantly felt that it was just as the Arhat had said. The ferociousness was all fake. It was all just a facade. Xing Ruo put his palms together in front of Gong Zheng. Then, he carefully moved a few steps to the side before quickly walking out the door. Gong Zheng turned his head and looked at the back of the fleeing figure, then said to the guards in the courtyard, "Did you hear that? He said that I'm kind and benevolent, and that children don't lie. It must be true." The guard pursed his lips. "Don't you know what kind of person you are? You don't think so?" When Gong Zheng saw him curling his lips, he immediately flew into a rage. He raised his fist, which was as big as a clay pot, and sent the guard flying. After leaving the courtyard, Xing Ruo felt a lot bolder. When a group of winged cavalry walked toward him, he immediately stood to the side and thought to himself, "It's fake." He put his palms together and said, "Amit Ba." Then he saw two guards standing to the side. He thought to himself, "It's fake." He put his palms together and said, "Amit Ba." However, he was surrounded by winged cavalry warriors and people from the Protectorate of the South. When Xing Ruo encountered people for the third time, he stood to the side and said, "It's fake. Amit Ba." "It's fake. Amit Ba." Xing Ruo stood on the side of the street and looked at the aboriginal soldiers passing by. "It's fake. Amit Ba." Xing Ruo realized that these people weren't as scary as they looked. Just as the Arhat had said, he became a little bolder. The group of winged cavalry warriors and guards were baffled. What fake Amit Ba? Could it be a local dialect? Was it actually a greeting? It took the little monk an hour to walk out of the street. He was finally able to occasionally see ordinary people, which made him feel a lot more at ease. Along the way, he looked at the quaint buildings on both sides of the street and the ordinary pedestrians. Whenever he met someone, he would say, "Amit Ba." After strolling until noon, Xing Ruo felt a little hungry. He found a roadside shop, put his palms together and said, "Amit Ba. Benefactor, can you give me a bowl of water and a bowl of rice?" The shopkeeper's face immediately turned black when he heard this. "If a little beggar like you asked for a cup of water and some food, I'll give it to you. You actually want rice? Those things are shipped from Great Xia, and even I can't afford them." "Oh, get lost." The little monk wasn't discouraged after being chased out and continued to beg for alms at the next shop. "Get lost." The second shopkeeper's reaction was exactly the same as the first one. "Amit Ba. Benefactor, can you give me a bowl of water and a bun? Pancakes are fine too." The little monk lowered his request at the third shop. "No, leave quickly. If you don't leave, I'll beat you up." The shopkeeper immediately picked up his broom after hearing this. Arhat is right. The people here don't respect Buddha, don't know true kindness, and don't have a merciful heart. Those who look like fiends are actually kind and charitable. They look easy to talk to, but are actually very vicious, Xing Ruo thought to himself. Finally, a few winged cavalry warriors who had seen him before passed by. Seeing that he was hungry, they threw him a piece of jerky and a pot of water, which made him feel very grateful. He was even more certain of his thoughts. "Fake Amit Ba. Principal Ren, our brothers who went to the north will be back in the city in 2 hours. I heard that they brought back a lot of people. How should we settle them?" A guard entered the room and asked Ren Bachien. What do you mean fake Amitba? Renbaqian was confused. It's the dialect of the southern natives of Tianjin Basin, and it means to say hello, the guard explained seriously. Recently, it seemed to be quite popular to say this. In any case, he saw a few guards who came in from outside greet him this way. Oh! Renbaqian was a little suspicious, but he didn't think too much about it and called for the guards to leave the city. At this moment, besides the original Aboriginal guards, there were 6 other people following behind Renbaqian. 4 of them were in their 30s or 40s, and they were all from the Lingshan sect. 2 of them used swords, 1 used a spear, and the last used a pair of steel sabers. The other 2 were slightly older and were from Qingyun sword. 1 looked like an old farmer and used a fork as a weapon. The other had white hair and beard, but he had a sturdy build and was only slightly weaker than the Aboriginals. He used a long saber. All 6 of them were earthwheel experts and weren't considered weak. In the past, they were all experts, but now, they had become Renbaqian's guards. However, seeing that the weakest among the winged cavalry was at the earthwheel level, they didn't feel that it was unfair. If there was, it was because they had fought to the death before, but now, they were mixed in with the Aboriginals as guards, which made them feel somewhat uncomfortable. The group left the city and didn't wait for long before they saw a group of people coming from afar. At the front were the people from the Golden Ring residence, and behind them were hundreds of people. Everyone's hands were tied up, and their clothes, which used to be gorgeous, were now dirty. Beside this group of people, there were dozens of winged cavalry warriors riding their mounts and moving forward slowly. Behind these people, there was a large number of carriages. However, the carriages weren't loaded with people, but with looted goods. Sir! When everyone arrived at the foot of the city, the winged cavalry warriors came up to greet them. Was everything all right along the way? Renbaqian asked. Sir, they were very well behaved. Not bad. Did you meet the army from the Protectorate of the South? Sir, there are still a few cities that haven't been cleared along the way, and they will only arrive in a few days. Renbaqian nodded, looked at the uneasy people behind them, and said, Release them. He then raised his voice and said, You aren't here as prisoners, but as a sign of friendly coexistence between the people of Tianjin Basin and the Aboriginals. The people of Tianjin Basin have many misunderstandings about the Aboriginals and the imperial court. I hope that when you return in the future, you can dispel this misunderstanding. Awkward silence. Misunderstanding? There was no misunderstanding at all. Renbaqian didn't mind and continued, I gave you a chance and was lenient, but it doesn't mean that I will always be lenient. After entering the city, be well behaved and know your place. Unless you are stronger than the one hanging at the top of the city wall. Sir Ren, who is that on top of the city wall? Zhang Changkong had been staring at the few people behind Renbaqian since the beginning. He had seen these people before. 4 of them were highly ranked experts in the Lingshan sect. He didn't expect them to be following behind Renbaqian. The other 2 were experts from the hidden village. It seemed like the Lingshan sect and Qingyun sword had surrendered. Who was that on top of the city wall? Based on what Renbaqian said, this person's identity wasn't simple. Spirit Spear Tingyu. I'm sure you have heard of him. Renbaqian sneered. The 4th most powerful expert in the world, Spirit Spear Tingyu? Everyone was shocked. How did Tingyu appear here? How did he die here? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.